3 hours of mind twisting. Paradoxes to fall asleep. 2. What if the very act of falling asleep is the greatest paradox of all? You spend your day chasing clarity, logic, meaning, only to close your eyes and willingly surrender to the unknown. Isn't that strange? You shut down your conscious mind, yet somehow your brain begins to dream in symbols that even you can't explain. Where does that you go? And who's watching it leave? Tonight, we won't just help you fall asleep. We'll take your mind through a maze of elegant contradictions. The Ship of Theseus, the Grandfather Paradox, Zeno's arrow, Schrödinger's cat. Each one a whisper from reality that maybe, just maybe, the universe isn't as solid as it seems. But don't worry. You're not here to solve these riddles. You're here to feel them, to let them drift across your consciousness like moonlight on water. So take a deep breath, let your thoughts loosen, and allow your mind to uncoil. Welcome to a place where questions are softer than answers, and sleep is just another way of wondering. The gate to the paradoxical garden. There are nights when the world softens, the noise fades, the lights dim. You find yourself lying in bed, eyes open but not really seeing, just drifting, thinking. And then something unexpected happens. Your thoughts stop marching in straight lines. They begin to loop, to spiral, to curve back on themselves like quiet rivers returning to their source. You aren't lost. You're simply arriving at a deeper place, a place where logic thins and wonder begins. What if your thoughts could fold into themselves like an origami of the mind? What if the memory of a dream felt more real than the fact of yesterday? What if the universe was not a machine to be decoded, but a riddle to be experienced, not with certainty, but with surrender? You're not here for answers tonight. You're here to breathe with the questions. That's what paradoxes are. They are not mistakes or logical errors. They are portals, little fractures in the wall of the known world where something softer shines through. A paradox is not a trap for the mind, but a massage for the soul. A soft place to rest when certainty becomes too heavy. When yourself in a strange garden. It's not bright, just gently lit by some unnamed source, like moonlight mixed with memory. This is not the kind of garden you walk through with a map. It's the kind you feel with your chest. The path isn't straight because neither are your thoughts here. And lining the walkway, there are mirrors. Not just ordinary mirrors, but ones that don't show your reflection directly. Some show you as a child, looking up with eyes wide open. Others show you older, wiser, maybe a little sadder, but still curious. Some mirrors flash your deepest fears in a flicker you almost don't catch. And some mirrors, they show nothing, just a shimmer of possibility. This is the paradoxical garden. And every thought you've tried to lock down, every belief you've held too tightly, begins to melt a little here. 'Cause paradoxes don't force you to reject what you know. They simply invite you to question why you know it. You're not walking to solve anything. You're walking to remember what it feels like to be alive in mystery. Maybe life isn't about finding clarity after all. Maybe it's about learning how to sit inside contradiction without panic. Maybe the point is not to understand, but to witness. And so we begin. Not with a loud declaration or a firm conclusion, but with a whisper, with the sensation that something quiet and ancient is opening its hand. A thought, a mirror, a flicker. Step gently now. We begin with a sentence that destroyed certainty. The Liar's Paradox. Some ideas don't knock, They slide in quietly and rearrange your whole sense of order. This is one of them. It wears a plain face, just a short sentence. This sentence is false. Read it again. Let it echo for a moment. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it's true. And in that tiny loop, the foundation of certainty begins to ripple. This is the liar's paradox, a logic puzzle so old it predates even written logic itself. It was first murmured by the Greek thinker Epimenides, who famously claimed, "All Cretans are liars," while being a Cretan himself. That simple statement twisted back on itself like a serpent eating its tail, a self-referential loop that logic couldn't swallow cleanly. The liar's paradox is not about wordplay. It's not a riddle meant to amuse. It's a crack in the way we understand truth. A sentence that folds into itself like a Mobius strip, always looping, never landing. You chase its meaning only to end up behind yourself, questioning the very language you used to chase it. Imagine standing between two mirrors, each reflecting the other. At first, it's beautiful, an endless corridor of reflections fading into infinity. But stare too long, and something unsettling happens. You lose track of which image was real, which reflection came first, which one is you. That's what this paradox does to your mind. It's not confusion for confusion's sake. It's an invitation to look deeper at the architecture of belief itself. We like to think that language is a ladder, that each sentence climbs us closer to truth. But here, language doubles back. The rungs crumble beneath our feet. Can something be both true and false? Or neither? Or both? Where do we even stand if we can't trust our own logic? Pause. Breathe. Let your mind stretch into the shape of the question, not the answer. How many of your thoughts, deep down, carry contradiction? How many of your beliefs say one thing while whispering another? You say, "I'm fine." But a part of you knows that's not always true. You say, "I don't care." But why does it echo so loud inside? The liar's paradox isn't just a sentence on paper. It's alive in us. In every moment we try to be two things at once, honest and guarded, strong and exhausted, logical and lost. It reminds us that being human is not about clean answers, but messy truth. And sometimes, the deepest wisdom is found not in fixing the contradiction, but in learning to hold it gently. Let yourself rest inside the discomfort. Let it be soft. Let it be a mirror that doesn't demand resolution. Let it reflect you back to yourself, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a question worth staying with. And now, from these tangled roots of truth, we move forward into a paradox that didn't just challenge language, but cracked the core of mathematics wide open. Shall we step deeper? Russell's Paradox. Some thoughts do not whisper from the edges. They wait. They let you sink into comfort. Then they gently pull the rug from under certainty itself. You start with something simple, a category, a label, a box that holds things. The set of all red things. The set of all even numbers. Your mind nods along easily. It feels clean, like lining up cups on a shelf. Logic works because you believe it can contain the world. Now imagine this, a set that includes all the sets that do not include themselves. It sounds innocent. It even sounds clever. But the moment you ask if this strange set includes itself, the floor of logic cracks open. If it does include itself, then it shouldn't, because it only includes sets that don't include themselves. But if it doesn't include itself, then it should, because it fits the rule. It doesn't contain itself, which is exactly the type of set it's supposed to include. And just like that, you're no longer standing on solid ground. You're floating inside a paradox. Not a circle, not a spiral, but something deeper, something self-eating, like an idea trying to swallow itself whole. This is Russell's paradox, and it isn't just a brain teaser. It's the quiet earthquake that shook the core of modern mathematics. Bertrand Russell uncovered it not to confuse, but to clarify. He was searching for clean foundations. What he found was the opposite: a wormhole at the heart of logic, a rule that couldn't hold itself up without breaking its own spine. Before this, mathematics was thought to be safe, pure, untouchable. But with one contradiction, the entire framework buckled. Whole theories had to be torn down and rebuilt. Systems once seen as universal had to be reevaluated, not because they were wrong, but because they tried to do too much, too neatly. And what about you? How often do you try to define yourself in a way that doesn't quite fit? You say you're strong, but sometimes you break in silence. You claim you've moved on, but you still check the door when no one's watching. You believe in honesty, but lie to yourself just enough to fall asleep. That's not hypocrisy. That's humanity. We are sets that cannot fully contain themselves. No box can hold everything we are. No label can cover every contradiction. And maybe it's not meant to. Pause with me for a moment. There's something strangely beautiful about ideas that refuse to stay still. Something tender about not having to be entirely one thing. The contradiction isn't a flaw. It's a sign that something real is trying to be felt. So tonight, let go of needing to categorize everything. Let your mind rest outside the boundaries. You don't have to fit perfectly. You don't have to hold yourself all at once. You're allowed to be both and neither. To know and not know. And just beyond this logic maze, past the cracked foundations and impossible sets, there's a small village, a simple man, a rule about shaving. And yet, somehow, it gets even stranger from here. Shall we go meet the barber? The Barber Paradox. There's a quiet little town. In it, a man makes his living shaving faces. But not just any faces. The rule is simple. He shaves all those who do not shave themselves, and only them. That's the agreement. He shaves those who don't, and if you shave yourself, he stays away. Neat, logical, until the mirror turns. Because now, the question slips in like a shadow under the door. Does the barber shave himself? The moment you ask it, the floor begins to tilt. If he does, then he shouldn't. The rule forbids it. After all, he only shaves those who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he must, because he shaves everyone who doesn't. So which is it? We're caught, not in confusion, but in contradiction. It's not that we don't know the answer. It's that no answer can exist. The very rule folds in on itself like an origami swan that can't decide whether to fly or collapse. This isn't just a trick question. It's a trapdoor in logic, a loop, a riddle that cannot be solved because its structure eats itself. This strange little story, known as the Barber Paradox, was imagined by the philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell. On the surface, it sounds like a riddle you might hear at a child's sleepover or in a game of logic puzzles. But underneath that simplicity is a thunderclap, because this paradox did something extraordinary. It exposed a crack in the foundation of mathematics itself. You see, Russell didn't invent this just for fun. He was exploring set theory, the study of how things are grouped together. And in doing so, he found that some sets, if you let them include themselves, create chaos. Like the set of all sets that do not include themselves. If it includes itself, it shouldn't. If it doesn't, it should. Just like the barber. This might seem abstract, but its consequences ripple into real life, into computer science, into how we write code, build systems, define logic gates. Because rules, especially self-referential ones, can collapse under their own weight. What happens when the rule maker is also ruled by the rule? Who watches the watchman? Who moderates the moderator? Who shaves the barber? It's like trying to fold a map into itself until it disappears. Like trying to chase your shadow around a lamppost, never catching it, but never able to stop running. This is the nature of self-reference. It spirals, it loops, it laughs quietly from inside the walls of your logic. And yet, somehow, this paradox feels familiar. Not just in philosophy class or theoretical math, but in the mirror. Because maybe you've felt this before. When you set a rule for others and suddenly find yourself tangled in it. When you say, "I never lie," and then face a truth too painful to tell. When you try to be both the one who decides and the one who obeys. The judge and the judged. The shaver and the shaved. Where in your life are you the barber? Where do your own rules fold inward? Where are you both the creator of expectations and the one burdened by them? It's a quiet question, not meant to be solved, only sat with, like a candle in the dark, flickering but steady. And now, as the logic loops fade into the hush of your thoughts, let's leave the barber behind. Let's trade paradox for particles. And in the grain of a single question, ask, when does a little become a lot? The answer, like so much in life, may be smaller than you think and stranger than you expect.
The Sorites Paradox. You start with a single grain of sand. It rests alone, insignificant, quiet, unremarkable. One grain isn't a heap. You add another. Still, it's just sand, not a pile. You continue, grain by grain, softly, slowly. At some point, somewhere between the 10th and the 10,000th, it becomes something else. It becomes a heap. But where exactly did that shift occur? This is the Sorites Paradox, a gentle riddle that creeps in without fanfare. The name comes from the Greek word sorites, meaning heap, and at first it might sound like child's play. But there's a strange weight to it, one that stretches far beyond sandcastles. It isn't really about sand at all. It's about transformation, identity, the slippery nature of change. You see, our minds long for precision. We want lines, thresholds, markers that tell us, this is now different. But life doesn't usually offer that luxury. Babies don't wake up one day as adults. Trust doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks, hairline thin, across time. Love doesn't vanish in a blink. It drifts, like mist receding from a window, barely noticeable until it's gone. At what moment does a few white lies become dishonesty? When does indulgence turn into addiction? When does feeling tired become burnout? These aren't questions with clear answers, and that's what makes them so unsettling. The Sorites Paradox doesn't scream. It whispers, and it makes you wonder how many small things in your life have slowly turned into something big, without you even noticing. Think of a habit you formed, not the loud ones, not the dramatic ruptures, but the quiet patterns, the late night scrolling that became sleeplessness, the missed calls that became distance, the skipped meals that became exhaustion. No one moment defined the shift, but the shift happened anyway. That's the paradox at work. There's a strange kind of beauty in this, the way a forest grows from seedlings, the way your face changes over years without you seeing it, the way the seasons turn, not with a single gust, but with a steady drift of light and temperature. The Sorites Paradox teaches us to respect the power of accumulation, to honor the thresholdless spaces where becoming unfolds in silence. And yet, it warns us too, that neglect can build just like care, that disconnection can deepen just like intimacy, that one grain of indifference, added daily, becomes a mountain. So the paradox is not just a game of logic, it's a mirror. It reflects how we live, how we change, how we lose things we never meant to. So pause, breathe. Think of something in your life that shifted too slowly to notice. Something that started out small, benign, even comforting, and grew into something you no longer recognized. Not because it stormed in, but because it drifted in, unnoticed. The truth is, life is a spectrum, not a switch. There are no clean lines between dusk and night, just stars blinking out one by one. No sirens announcing when the heart starts to harden. No signposts when joy fades into numbness. Only gradients, only whispers. And so, the next time you find yourself wondering how you ended up here, wherever here may be, trace the grains, follow the heap. You might find that the most important changes in life are the ones you never felt happening at all. And if gradual change is real, what happens when everything is slowly replaced, one piece at a time? Let's step onto a ship built from memory, a ship whose planks have all been swapped, yet somehow it still sails. That's where we go next.
Number 6. The Ship of Theseus. There's something strangely quiet about the question of identity. Not loud like a debate, not rigid like a rule. It whispers, it lingers. It waits in the folds of our memory, our reflection, our breath. Tonight, that whisper takes the shape of a ship, a paradoxical vessel sailing gently through time and thought. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine this ship, ancient, noble, loved. Over the years, plank by plank, piece by piece, its parts are replaced. The wood rots and is renewed. The sails tear and are sewn anew. The mast cracks and is recarved. One day, not a single part remains from the original, and yet it still sails under the same name. Is it still the Ship of Theseus? Now stretch the paradox a little further. Suppose someone gathered all the discarded pieces, the original planks, the old ropes, the weathered wheel, and rebuilt them into a ship. Now there are two, one with continuous history, but new parts, and one made of all the old, familiar wood. So, which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Which one holds the truth? This isn't just a riddle for philosophers. This is your life in disguise. You are the ship. Every cell in your body is replaced over time. Skin renews, blood refreshes, even your bones rebuild themselves. Biologically speaking, you're not the same person you were a decade ago. Your thoughts have changed. Your beliefs have shifted. You've loved, lost, failed, and grown. You've forgotten some things, forgiven others, and yet you still say, "This is me." So what is you? Is it your memories, the mental cargo you carry across the years? Is it your habits, your voice, your routines? Or is it something deeper, something beyond form or function, something that doesn't need to be seen to be known? Perhaps identity is not a fixed point, but a rhythm, not a shape, but a song. The melody may change, the instruments may be swapped, but the tune, the essence, still finds its way back to your ears when the world quiets down. Maybe you are not one version or the other. Maybe you are both. The rebuilt ship and the salvaged one. The continuity of name and the memory of wood. Here's the gentle twist. Identity might not be about finding the real version of yourself. It might be about learning to embrace the fact that you contain multitudes, that you are allowed to outgrow your own reflection, that the ship sails forward not because it remains unchanged, but because it endures change with grace. Close your eyes and let that sink in. Not all truths come with hard lines or final answers. Some arrive like fog across the ocean, soft, enveloping, impossible to hold, but unmistakably real. Who are you when nothing remains the same? And what part of you, if any, truly does? Breathe with that question. Let it echo gently inside your chest. You don't need to solve it. Just let it be with you, like the tide beneath the ship, always moving, always returning. And as you drift in that thought, let's move now to another riddle, a slow race between certainty and paradox. Let's meet a tortoise who always wins and a logic that never quite arrives.
Number 7. Zeno's paradoxes. Some nights the mind doesn't drift, it races. Thoughts sprint forward like Achilles, hoping to outrun worry, to conquer restlessness, to finally catch the quiet. But no matter how fast the mind moves, peace always seems to stay just ahead, like a tortoise with a head start. And the more you chase it, the more it moves. You reach one thought, and another appears. You solve one problem, and a smaller one opens underneath. You approach stillness, and it slips just out of reach again. This is the heart of Zeno's paradox, an ancient idea that refuses to fade with time. The Greek philosopher Zeno once told a story. Achilles, the fastest of men, gives a tortoise a small head start in a race. Surely he'll catch it. But every time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a bit forward. And when he reaches that new spot, it's moved again. This continues endlessly. Step after step, the tortoise always stays ahead. To the modern ear, it sounds absurd. Of course Achilles will pass the tortoise, but Zeno wasn't trying to win a race. He was trying to show us something deeper, that even motion, the very act of going forward, can break down under the pressure of infinity. Because if space can be divided forever into smaller and smaller pieces, then crossing any distance requires completing an infinite number of steps. And how can you do that in finite time? Today, we know how to solve this mathematically. Calculus resolves the paradox. It tells us that even though there are infinite steps, their total length adds up to a finite distance. Achilles wins the race. Case closed. Logically. But logic doesn't always quiet the mind, especially not at night. Because Zeno's paradox was never just about running. It was about chasing something you're told you should catch, but never quite do. Think about your own life for a moment. The goals you set. The dreams that gleam just ahead. That moment when you say, once I reach this point, I'll rest. But when you get there, the target has moved. You land the job, and suddenly it's about the promotion. You get the promotion, and now it's about the house. The house turns into the perfect relationship. The perfect relationship becomes the need for balance. The tortoise is always moving, always just one step ahead. And so, you keep running. Because that's what we're taught. Forward is the only direction. Progress is purpose. Rest is laziness. But what if the race itself is the illusion? What if the chase is not something to conquer, but something to understand? Tonight, let's try something different. Close your eyes. Imagine the world fading into stillness. The lights, the noise, the pressure. Gone. Now picture yourself not chasing, but walking, just walking. And beside you, the tortoise. Not behind, not ahead, just there, step by step, together. The paradox doesn't vanish, it transforms. Instead of being a trap, it becomes a companion. An old riddle with no answer, but infinite presence. You're no longer racing against it. You're learning from it. Because maybe rest isn't at the end of the road. Maybe it's in the step itself. Maybe peace isn't something you arrive at, but something that walks beside you when you stop trying to win. And when you finally stop to breathe, really breathe, you realize the tortoise was never running at all. It was waiting. waiting for you to slow down long enough to notice the stillness was always there. Now let's take this deeper. Let's carry this quiet question into the realm of the eternal. What happens when paradox touches the divine? When the infinite doesn't just bend logic, but belief itself? Let's walk there together.
The Omnipotence Paradox. There's a quiet place in the mind where logic starts to bend. It's not a failure of reason, it's a threshold. You don't cross it by force, but by letting go. And this paradox, this strange, ancient question, is one of those gates. Can God create a rock so heavy that even He cannot lift it? At first, it sounds like a riddle whispered by a child on a starry night. Naive, playful. But linger with it a little longer, and it begins to unravel something deeper. This is not a mockery of faith. It's a mirror held up to the edges of logic itself. A question not about theology, but about boundaries. Because if God is truly omnipotent, able to do anything, then surely He could create such a rock. But if He cannot lift it, doesn't that mean there's something He cannot do? Then again, if He cannot create it in the first place, that too reveals a limitation. No matter how you twist it, the idea of absolute power collapses into contradiction, like trying to draw a square circle or reach the end of an endless staircase. And maybe that's the point. Maybe omnipotence, when forced through the machinery of rigid logic, starts to eat itself. Not because God is flawed, but because our language is. Logic is a compass we trust in daylight, but some questions live in the dark. The real lesson here isn't about divine strength. It's about the human need to pin down the infinite, to explain, define, and box the boundless into categories we can manage. But some truths don't want to be managed. Some truths just are. So what if real power isn't about doing everything, but knowing what must not be done? The wise don't try to prove their strength by bending the world. They show it by not needing to. A mountain doesn't need to move to prove it is strong. It simply stands. And you, yes, you, what are you trying to prove tonight? Are you lifting burdens too heavy for your heart just to convince yourself that you can? Are you demanding clarity from a universe that was never designed to be simple? Breathe. Let the paradox settle. It was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be felt. Ask yourself, must every mystery be unwrapped to be meaningful? Or can some questions hold value simply by being asked? The mind wants closure, but the soul learns to rest in wonder. Now, slowly, gently, we shift. You're in a quiet room. Someone hands you 2 envelopes. Each contains money. One has twice as much as the other. You're told you can open one, or switch. You hesitate. Why? Because uncertainty lives here too. And with it, another riddle. But for now, rest your mind. You don't need to choose yet. Just feel the weight of the question, like a rock that may or may not be lifted. Let it sit with you. Let it soften your need for certainty. The night is still wide. The questions are patient. And you're exactly where you need to be. The 2 envelopes problem. There's something unsettling about having to choose, especially when the stakes are unknown. Picture this. You're handed 2 envelopes, both sealed. You're told one contains twice the amount of money as the other. That's it. No more information. You pick one. You hold it gently in your hands. But before you open it, someone leans in and says, "You may switch if you want." And now your mind stirs. You begin to run the numbers in your head. Not numbers from any actual knowledge, but estimates from the fog of uncertainty. What if you've picked the smaller envelope? Then switching means doubling your money. But what if you already hold the larger one? Then switching cuts your money in half, so your thoughts spiral. I stand to gain more than I might lose, right? That little itch of logic whispers, switch. It seems like the smarter move, but then when you switch, the same thought creeps back in. Wait, shouldn't I switch again? And then again, and again, until suddenly you're stuck in a loop. This is the two envelopes problem. On the surface, it feels like a simple game of chance, but the deeper you go, the more it twists the mind. Because if switching always seems better, even after switching, then logic starts to devour itself. The paradox doesn't lie in the envelopes. It lies in you. It lies in the way our brains handle uncertainty. Rational thought is our guiding torch, but sometimes it lights up illusions. The truth is, mathematically, there's no advantage to switching once. The expected value balances out. But our instincts? They don't want balance. They want more. And that desire for more, for certainty, for control, leaks out into the rest of life. How many times have you made a choice only to second-guess it moments later? How often do we live like this, clutching one envelope while peeking toward another? We chase relationships, jobs, paths, always wondering if there's something better. Somewhere, someone is happier, richer, freer. Somewhere, there's an envelope we should have picked. But in that chase, we often lose what we already have. This paradox is more than a math puzzle. It's a mirror. It shows us how quickly the mind turns uncertainty into anxiety, and how that anxiety can mask itself as reason. Even when there's no real gain, we keep switching, not because it's smarter, but because we can't bear to sit with not knowing. So tonight, maybe pause. Feel the envelope in your hands, not the one you didn't choose, this one. Ask yourself, are you at peace with your decisions? Or are you still holding something sealed, afraid to open it because you think something better is just one more switch away? Breathe into that question. Let the air around it settle. Life will always offer another choice, another door, another envelope. But peace? That only arrives when you stop needing to switch. Let that be enough, for now, because we're about to step deeper, not just into another riddle, but into something colder, a place where logic meets fate, where the line between justice and cruelty begins to blur. But for now, rest in this quiet dilemma. The envelope doesn't have to be opened to teach you something. Sometimes, the weight of the decision is enough.
The execution no one saw coming. There's a soft breath in the air, like the hush that falls before a verdict, the kind of quiet that doesn't settle. It holds its breath with you. Somewhere inside a shadowed prison, a man awaits his fate, not with panic, but with logic. They said it would be a surprise, he whispers to himself. But if I'm alive by Thursday night, then Friday is impossible, because I'd know. And if Friday is ruled out, Thursday must be too. If I make it to Wednesday, then Wednesday's no surprise either. So he continues backward, unraveling the days like fraying thread. By his reasoning, there is no day left for the execution to occur, because it cannot be a surprise if it's predictable. And yet, it happens. On Wednesday, unexpectedly. A guard opens the cell door, gently nods. The man's eyes widen, not with fear, but disbelief. But, I thought, he begins, and the guard, almost kindly, replies, that's exactly why today is the day. Isn't it strange how sometimes, when we think we've figured life out, it simply nods and changes the ending? This paradox, called the unexpected hanging, is not about punishment. It's about the mind's fragile grip on prediction. The prisoner's logic was sound. So sound, in fact, that it shattered itself. His very certainty became the blindfold. And maybe that's us too, sitting quietly in our lives, calculating every outcome, drawing lines across the calendar, whispering, "It won't happen on that day. I'll be ready by then." But life, like the executioner, doesn't always wait for readiness. It waits for blindness. A voice in a cafe once leaned in and asked me, "Do you ever think you're living your whole life trying to outsmart disappointment?" I paused, coffee in hand, unsure whether to nod or cry. Because we build systems, we organize, we protect ourselves with plans. But there's a kind of freedom, quiet, uncomfortable freedom, that lives just past control. The prisoner didn't know that, and perhaps neither do we. So now, take a moment. Let your breath settle like dust in a forgotten hallway. Ask yourself gently, not accusingly, am I living inside a logic trap of my own design? Have I grown so good at preparing that I've forgotten how to receive? Sometimes the most unexpected moment is when we finally stop guessing. That's when life steps in. Now, let's step out of the prison walls, leave behind the clang of certainty. Ahead of us is a quiet lab, humming with stillness. You float, not in fear, but in thought. Wires trail from your mind like dreams being translated. Somewhere nearby, a scientist observes gently. She doesn't interrupt. She just watches, as if to say, "You're not here to be solved, just observed, just felt." And maybe that's all this is. Not an answer, just a pause between the paradoxes. Close your eyes if you haven't already. If you've drifted, that's okay. You were meant to. We'll still be here.
The brain in a vat. Somewhere, a brain is dreaming it has a body, a flicker, a pulse, a current of awareness like a drop of ink in water, slowly spreading, forming thought. You open your eyes, or you think you do. There's no ceiling, no floor, just information. The room is memory-shaped. Your name floats by like dust in sunlight, familiar but untouchable. Somewhere you believe there's a chair beneath you, but when you reach for it, your hand doesn't move. In fact, do you even have a hand? There's no pain, no hunger, only the smooth hum of something watching, something feeding you images, warm coffee, childhood street corners, the sound of your mother's voice saying your name like a secret. But wait, that warmth, is it real? Or is it being piped into your consciousness like a dream with perfect detail? Now pause. What if you were never born into a body? What if you've always been this, an organ suspended in liquid, wires feeding you a story, a brain in a jar, hallucinating a life? That idea doesn't shout, it whispers. And it doesn't knock, it seeps in. Because this isn't just fiction. It's philosophy's needle to the skin, a modern echo of Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Number not anymore. Because here, even the thinking might not be yours. This thought experiment, the brain in a vat, doesn't ask if you exist. It asks if everything you experience could be false, and whether you'd ever know. Let that settle in your spine. The taste of food, the weight of grief, the thrill of touch. What if they're just signals? Perfectly calibrated illusions fed to your cortex like a puppet string? And if so, what part of you is real? In a world where you zoom through faces, swipe through lives, walk through dreams built in silicon, how different are you really from that brain in the vat? Somewhere, a man stares at a screen. He says he's real, but all his senses are processed through pixels and code. Somewhere else, a woman cries while watching a movie she knows is fake. But the tears are real. The ache is real. And maybe that's the point. Because even if you're a simulation, Even if your body is fiction and your world is a carefully orchestrated lie, the feelings still burn. The love still leaves marks. So maybe it's not about what's true. Maybe it's about what hurts, what lingers. Maybe reality isn't what you touch, but what touches you. Now, listen closely. In the distance, something changes. A hum lowers. You feel scanned. Not by eyes, not by machines, but by something deeper. Imagine a machine that scans your entire body, every cell, every thought, and sends you piece by piece to another place. You arrive whole, perfect. But here's the catch. The original, the version that stood trembling inside the chamber, is gone. So who are you really? The echo, or the silence that follows? Let the question hang like mist in a forest before dawn. Don't chase it. Just breathe. Because maybe you're not a body. Maybe not even a mind. Maybe you are the pause between both. A quiet thought, trying to remember where it came from.
The Teleportation Paradox. You step into the pod. The doors close behind you with a hush. Inside, silence, light, and the faint hum of possibility. And then, nothing. Or rather, everything. Because across the room, or maybe across the planet, another pod hisses open. A person steps out. They blink, they breathe, they stretch their arms, feel the floor beneath their feet, and smile. They remember your mother's laugh. They remember your childhood fears. They even remember stepping into the pod. But here's the paradox that unspools itself like a silver thread in the dark. Did you just arrive? Or did you vanish? Because the person who stepped out isn't technically you. Your original body? Gone. Disassembled atom by atom. What remains is a copy, a perfect replica, a mirror with breath. They think they are you, they feel like you. But are they you? There's no scream, no alarm, just this quiet, aching question echoing in the dark between realities. Did you die, and no one noticed? This is the Teleportation Paradox. It asks us to peer into the fault line between identity and continuity. What makes you? You? Is it your memories? But what if those can be uploaded, downloaded, copied? Is it your body? Yet your cells renew, your atoms shift, your appearance changes every year. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, not physically, not emotionally. So where is the soul in all of this? Where does you live, if not in the parts? Could it be that identity is not a fixed point, but a flame, dancing, flickering, passed from wick to wick without ever truly being the same? And if that's true, then here's the quiet horror. Every night when you sleep, and every day when you change, a little version of you dies, and a slightly new you wakes up. So then, if the teleportation pod is just a faster version of this daily dying, what are we really afraid of? Maybe it's not death we fear. Maybe it's the idea that no one, not even us, can prove that we're still here. But maybe, just maybe, that's where peace begins. In realizing that you are not a statue to be preserved. You are a river. You are breath. You are the song, not the singer. You are the process, not the product. And the self? It's a story that keeps rewriting itself as long as someone turns the page. So inhale. You are here. This moment is real, even if you are not what you were a moment ago. Now close your eyes, because just ahead is a woman who knows every fact, every theory, every color, except one. And in her silence waits another question. What if knowledge and experience are not the same thing? Let's drift there now. Let's listen.
Mary's room. She had mastered color, without ever seeing it. Mary didn't live in ignorance. She lived in brilliance. Her brain was a cathedral of numbers. She knew red the way a machine might know gravity, perfectly, objectively, unfeeling. Every photon's dance, every neuron's flicker, she knew. The science, the data, the measurements, wavelengths between 600 and 700 nanometers, the cones in the retina, the brain's response in V4. But Mary had never seen red because her world was drained of it. Everything around her whispered in black, white, and ash. The books, the laboratory, the light. And then, one day, the door opened. No ceremony, no lightning, just a door, slightly ajar. She stepped through, and it hit her. Red. It didn't announce itself. It arrived. Not a concept, a presence, not a number, a feeling, like a slap across the soul, like a childhood memory you didn't know you had. It wasn't something to understand. It was something to survive. And in that moment, despite all her knowing, Mary changed, which leaves us with something cruelly elegant. If she changed, did she ever truly know? If knowledge was enough, red would have been boring. But it wasn't. It was new. Which means there are things the brain can't hold until the heart has touched them. So what is knowing? Is it the cold clarity of information or the quiet violence of experience? You can learn about fire. You can write an essay on pain. You can map the neurochemistry of love, but you don't know them until they burn, until they break, until they hold you so tightly you forget how you were before. Mary didn't just step out of her room. She stepped out of theory and into being, out of control and into color. And now, so do you. Because if Mary can teach us anything, it's this. Some truths refuse to be taught. They demand to be felt. They live in the space between data points, in the tremble, in the gasp, in the tear that comes before you even know why. So here's your invitation, not to study more, but to live more. Not to name every emotion, but to let one catch you off guard. Because maybe the deepest form of wisdom is not knowing everything, but knowing the moment something changes you. And if you're ready, there's another story waiting. A planet just like ours, but where a single word tears open reality. Come closer. The Twin Earth Thought Experiment. You find yourself by a lake at dusk. The water is still, reflecting a sky that no longer burns, but glows. You bend down, cup the liquid in your hands, and feel its chill. You call it water. So does everyone you know. But on another planet, let's call it Twin Earth, someone else does the same. They dip their hands into a clear, cool liquid and say water too. It looks the same, tastes the same, behaves the same. But chemically, it's not H2O. It's something else entirely. Let's call it XYZ. And suddenly, a question arises, not just for philosophers, but for all of us who live by words. When they say water, are they talking about the same thing we are? This is where language begins to slip, like sand between fingers. Because it's not just a question of vocabulary, it's a question of reality. Does the meaning of a word live inside your head, shaped by your understanding? Or is it anchored in the real, tangible world outside of you? Is water what you think it is, or what it chemically is? This soft tension between thought and substance reminds us that words are bridges, but not all bridges are solid. Some stretch across foggy spaces where meaning sways with context, with perception, with time. And in that fog, we start to wonder, what other words in our lives have changed beneath our feet, like shifting earth? Love, a word we once used for butterflies in the stomach, now used for stability, for kindness, for letting someone go. Home, once a building, now a feeling, a person, a memory you carry like a scent. Self, once a solid identity, now a river that runs in many directions. The words stay the same, but their gravity shifts. That's the quiet brilliance of the Twin Earth experiment. It doesn't just ask, "What is water?" It whispers, "What is meaning?" And maybe more urgently, where does it live? Does it live in shared molecules, in neural patterns, or in the space between two people trying to understand each other? You see, meaning is not a fossil, fixed and preserved. It's more like weather, shaped by time, place, and pressure. Words are not mirrors. They are lanterns. They don't reflect the world. They try to illuminate it. Sometimes dimly, sometimes beautifully. So next time you speak a word like love or truth or forgiveness, ask yourself, what does it mean here? What does it mean now? Because words can guide you. They can shape how you think, how you feel, how you live, but they are only maps, and maps are not the territory. So rest here by the lake of thought. Let the ripples of language settle. Let the stillness speak. And when you're ready, let's flip the spectrum. What if your red is my green? What if perception itself holds a deeper paradox than language ever could? Let's step quietly into that next mystery. The inverted spectrum problem. It begins so simply, like a child's question whispered in a classroom. What if my red is your green, and we'd never know the difference? We learn early to point and label, to call the sky blue, the sun yellow, the grass green. But who taught us what those colors feel like on the inside? Nobody. Because nobody can. Here's the strange thing. If your colors were inverted from mine, but your reactions matched, if you still slowed down at sunsets and lit up at neon signs, I would never notice. You could go your whole life mirroring me, while seeing a world that feels like a completely different painting. And so, this isn't just a question about color, it's about experience, about qualia. That tender word philosophers use to describe the raw feel of being you, the sparkle behind your eyes, the heaviness of sorrow, the taste of cinnamon and memories. It's not something science can measure, not something language can pin down, and yet it shapes everything. You could describe pain to 100 people, but no one will ever feel your pain but you. They'll nod, they'll care, they'll do their best, but your ache is yours alone. So let this thought settle gently over you. The person you love most in this world, the one you'd walk through fire for, they may never truly know what joy feels like in your body. Not precisely, not completely. That's not a tragedy, it's a miracle. It means that even in our most shared moments, there's a sacred privacy to our minds. We are always a little hidden, always a little alone in our colors. And yet, we reach, we try. We say, I understand, and sometimes that's close enough. Sometimes words are like shadows thrown on a wall, hints of what's inside the cave, not the fire itself. Let's pause here. Breathe. What does this moment feel like to you? Right now, in your chest, behind your eyes, that quiet little tingle that no one else will ever quite experience in the same way. It's yours, entirely. No one will ever wear it or carry it or call it by name exactly right, but it matters, and it's real. And that's the beauty of being human. We live in mirrors, close enough to reflect, but never to fully merge. Still, we try, and maybe trying is what makes it beautiful. Now, with that softness still glowing behind your breath, we'll take one more step forward into a strange modern paradox, one that doesn't ask, what color do you see, but how many things do you want to choose from? From the aisle of endless cereals to the infinite scroll of online lives, we face a new kind of uncertainty. But for now, just stay with this. Your red may be someone else's green, and yet you both call it beautiful. And that's enough. Let's move forward into the next paradox, the one that waits quietly in the cereal aisle, humming with the quiet chaos of too much freedom.
The paradox of choice. When you walk into a store just to buy toothpaste. That's all. A simple task. But as you step into the fluorescent light, you're met with a wall of choices. 40 different kinds. Whitening, enamel repair, fresh breath, charcoal, mint, citrus, organic, ultra-sensitivity. And suddenly, this 5-minute errand becomes a quiet storm. You stand there longer than you should. You scan the rows, read the labels, feel your fingers hovering indecisively. In the end, you walk out with nothing at all. Not because you didn't want toothpaste, but because choosing felt too heavy, too uncertain. This isn't laziness. It's not a flaw in your will. It's something deeper, something ancient dressed in modern clothes. Psychologist Barry Schwartz gave it a name, the paradox of choice. And once you notice it, you'll see it everywhere. You'd think more freedom equals more happiness, but the opposite often unfolds. As the number of options increases, so does anxiety. Not just in the store, but in your heart. We think freedom is the ability to choose anything, but when the possibilities stretch endlessly before us, we freeze. We fear choosing wrong. We mourn the paths we didn't take, even the ones we barely glanced at. Each option becomes a silent ghost, tugging at our sleeves. What if you picked that one instead? Would life be better? Would you be happier? And so, instead of feeling free, we feel lost. We scroll endlessly through movies, dating profiles, careers, identities. We live with one foot always in another life, a parallel version of ourselves we'll never meet, but can't stop imagining. You fall in love, and still wonder if someone else out there was more right. You choose a job, and still check listings. You move to a new city, and still look over your shoulder, back toward home. That hum of doubt, of what if, isn't a failure of the heart. It's the mind trying to navigate a world too full, too fast, too loud. But here's the quiet truth. Peace isn't found in having every door open. It's found in walking through one and locking it gently behind you. Not out of fear, but devotion, presence, wholeness. You don't need every flavor. You don't need every path. You need this one, the one you've chosen, even if it's imperfect, especially if it's imperfect. So take a breath, right now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your mind loosen its grip on the roads not taken. Let go of the need to always optimize, always analyze, always wonder if you could have done better. Hold what is. Let what if rest for a while. Because true freedom isn't found in infinite options. It's found in making peace with the one you hold in your hand, in tasting the moment, in choosing fully, not perfectly. And as that realization softens the noise, another question rises like mist from a still lake. Are you really the one making these choices? Or is something older, deeper, already at work, guiding your hand before you even know why? Let's wander into that mystery next. Let's ask, what part of you decides before you even speak?
Free will versus determinism. A quiet streetlight flickers above a still bench. The night doesn't ask your permission to fall. It simply arrives. Much like that, some choices feel like they flow through us, not from us. And in this moment, as you lie back and listen, let the weight of that question drift gently into your chest. Did I choose this thought? Or did it choose me? A woman once sat at a crossroads, unsure which path to take. She said aloud, "I'll follow my instinct." A man nearby, reading a newspaper, looked up and replied softly, "But what if your instinct was shaped long before you had a say?" That's where we begin, with the age-old debate between free will and determinism, two sides of a coin spinning endlessly in the dark. Determinism whispers that everything is written, the wind, the waves, the way you woke up today with that song already in your head. It tells us that life is a grand cascade of causes, each effect born from another, like dominoes laid out long before we arrived. The laws of physics don't pause to ask what you want. They just continue, elegantly, relentlessly. But then there's something else, a strange tension, that flicker in your gut when you pause before saying yes, that moment where you feel aware, not like a stone rolling downhill, but like someone standing at the top, choosing whether to leap or linger. Do you believe you chose to be here tonight? A voice beside you asks gently. Maybe it's a stranger. Maybe it's someone who feels like a memory. You don't respond right away, not because you don't know, but because you feel the question shifting something deep. Modern neuroscience complicates this feeling even more. Studies show our brains make decisions milliseconds before we become consciously aware of them. Your hand reaches before your mind agrees. Your lips move before you know what you'll say. So then, is your consciousness a captain or a commentator? Are we puppets of biology or masters of a hidden language too quick to notice? The man folds his paper. So, if I was going to smile before I knew I'd smile, did I smile at all? You smile back, not because you chose to, or maybe because you did. It's hard to tell. And that's the mystery, isn't it? Now, take a slow breath. Let your thoughts roll like ripples across a quiet pond. Feel your chest rise, fall. Was that your decision, or something older than choice? Notice the silence between questions. It's in that silence that the self often slips through. If you press gently on the idea of I, what remains? Maybe the one asking the question is just another current in the stream, a voice echoing through the halls of perception. And if that's true, does it frighten you? Or does it free you? At the edge of sleep, logic softens. It's okay not to know. It's okay to drift. Even philosophers close their eyes eventually. So if you feel the pull to let go, that's not weakness. That's the river guiding you home. Was that your choice? Or was it always meant to be this way? The self-reference loop. Who am I when I ask, who am I? In a quiet room, perhaps late at night, you pause in the middle of an ordinary thought. Something subtle stirs, like a question slipping in at the edge of consciousness. Who is thinking these things? It doesn't arrive like a grand philosophical inquiry. It feels more like a whisper, so gentle that if you're busy, you won't hear it. But once you do, you can't unhear it. What we often mistake for the self sometimes feels like a camera accidentally filming its own screen. The image loops endlessly, each time a beat late, each time slightly more distorted. And then, before you know it, you're caught in a loop. Awareness of awareness, noticing your own noticing, a journey folding inward without a clear endpoint. We tend to think this is stability. We say, I'm the kind of person who likes this. I'm not someone who would do that. These sound solid, but if you look closely, they're always built on a memory, a habit, a passing feeling, like mistaking a ripple for the lake itself. So what if the I isn't a fixed center at all? What if it's just a chain of reflections held together by a story being told in real time? Is there truly a self here, or just a process? In Buddhist philosophy, this isn't a paradox. It's anatta, the absence of a permanent self. Only skandhas, sensations, perceptions, thoughts, impulses, and consciousness, like clouds changing shape across the sky of the mind. Not a flame at the center, but flickers of light. Not a pearl inside a shell, but the ocean's current flowing through it. And what happens when you gently let go of the idea that you need to be someone? There's no dramatic collapse, just a quieting, a sense of release, like untying a knot you didn't know you were gripping. No role to play, no case to defend, no need to prove anything. You don't disappear, you simply soften, expand, like a room after a window has been opened. There's no narrator left, just the breath within the story. And then another quiet question rises, like the next ripple stirred by a passing breeze. If the observer is also part of what's being observed, can we ever truly see clearly? Or does the act of observing always leave fingerprints? Perhaps that's where we begin to step into one of the strangest realms in all of science, a place that doesn't just bend reason, but bends reality itself. The observer effect. In a quiet living room, someone sits across from a window. Outside, the street is still, a leaf trembling on its branch. For a while, they hadn't noticed it. It had simply been part of the background, the way wallpaper fades into silence. But now, for some reason, their gaze finds it, and as they keep watching, something shifts. It's not that the leaf changed, not exactly, but it feels more alive now. The way it sways, the faint twitch when the wind nudges it, almost as if their attention brought it into focus, not just visually, but existentially. That moment, that quiet shift, it's where this story begins. In the world of quantum physics, there's a strange little rule with big consequences. It says, the very act of observing something can change what it is. Not in some poetic sense, but literally. They call it the observer effect, and it's not theory. It's been shown again and again. There's a famous experiment. Picture this: 2 narrow slits in a wall and tiny particles being fired toward them, one by one. When no one watches, the particles behave like waves. They pass through both slits at once, like they can't decide where they are. But when someone observes them, just watches, they pick a path. One slit, one place, one reality. The particles don't behave the same just because they were seen. They behave differently because they were seen. It's a bit like standing in a room full of people and only one person meeting your eyes. That moment, shared attention, changes the air. Suddenly, something becomes real that wasn't real before. So let's slow down here. Because this isn't just about particles in a lab, it's about the way our minds shape the world, not through willpower, through attention. When you look at something, really look at it, it becomes more than it was. A corner of your room you've ignored for months, a person you've taken for granted, a feeling you've been pushing away. Once you turn toward it, it becomes clearer, denser, more real. And the opposite is also true. The things you don't look at, they fade, like an old photo left in a drawer. Still there, but ghost-like. Here's something curious. Each time you remember something, let's say a moment from last year, you don't just replay it, you rebuild it, bit by bit. Your observation, your present attention, rewrites the past just slightly, like drawing over pencil lines with a darker pen. Maybe that's the part no one tells you, that your gaze is not passive, it's creative. You're not just witnessing the world, you're participating in it. So tonight, wherever you are, on your bed, in your chair, curled on the couch, try this. Bring your attention to your breath, not to change it, just to see it. See what it feels like when you follow it gently. In, outside again. That's the observer effect, right there. In your body, in your now. And it leaves a quiet question in its wake. If paying attention can change the present, what else might it be changing? The delayed choice. Somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, the mind loosens its grip on what came before. That's when we find it easiest to drift, not just through thought, but through time itself, not in clocks or calendars, but in memories. In that strange space, there's a question waiting quietly for us. Does the future decide the past? Physicist John Wheeler once imagined an experiment that still bends the minds of those who dare to follow its trail: the delayed choice experiment. At its heart is a mystery that feels like it belongs more to dreams than to labs. A single photon, a tiny particle of light, is sent on a path. It can act like a wave, spread out, soft, potential. Or it can act like a particle, sharp, decided, complete. But the trick is this: which one it becomes depends on how you choose to observe it after it has already traveled. Yes, you decide how it behaved only once the journey is done. As if the present moment reaches back and rewrites the past, as if reality itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what you choose to believe. And that's not just physics, that's personal. Because if light can be undecided until it's seen, what about our memories? Sometimes, when we revisit an old wound, it feels different, not because the facts have changed, but because we have. The same moment, once sharp and painful, can become softer under a gentler gaze. That's the paradox. Perhaps the past is not fixed. Perhaps it's fluid. Perhaps what you remember isn't a snapshot, but a living scene, one that moves each time you look at it, like a shadow that shifts with your position in the light. So ask yourself this, softly: what parts of your past have changed shape simply because you've grown? What memories feel different not because they were false, but because you've finally found the courage to see them without blame? What if healing isn't about erasing or rewriting your story? What if it's about reading the same words, but hearing a different meaning in them? Maybe Zeno's tortoise never stopped running. Maybe it just looked back one day and saw Achilles walking beside him. Because peace, like that tortoise, sometimes leads us without us knowing. We chase it endlessly, only to realize it was waiting where we started, not ahead, but within. Time, then, is not a road we move along, one direction only. It might be more like a spiral staircase, always turning, yet somehow rising, or a breath, each inhale revisiting the same air, but in a new rhythm. It's not linear, it's layered, and in those layers, the past can shimmer with new light. So let the idea float. You don't need to hold it, just rest beside it. The universe, it seems, is more poetic than mechanical. And tonight, your thoughts are allowed to wander backward, not to regret, but to re-see, because in doing so, you aren't just exploring memory, you're shaping meaning. As the edges of this thought begin to blur, your mind may soften too. That's okay. If you drift into sleep, let it come. This idea will wait, and when you return, it may feel different, because you will be different. Next, we meet something stranger still. A demon, they say, who knows the past, present, and future all at once. Or, does he? Just like the photon, he may not know until you choose. Laplace's demon. Close your eyes. Now, picture a still room, lit only by the soft pulse of thought. You are not alone in this room, but with a presence, not a person, not a god, but a mind so vast, so precise, it knows everything. Not in the way we say, we know someone or know the answer to a riddle. No, this is a knowing that sees the dance of every atom, the tilt of every molecule, the quiet sway of every heartbeat across the universe, all at once. This is Laplace's demon, a thought experiment whispered into history by Pierre-Simon Laplace in the early 19th century. He asked us to imagine, what if an intelligence existed so all-knowing that if it knew the present in its totality, every position, every movement, every detail of every particle, it could see the past and predict the future with perfect accuracy? No hesitation, no deviation, just clarity. And for a moment, it feels seductive, doesn't it? To imagine that everything has an answer, that nothing escapes the net of cause and effect. But then something colder seeps in. If everything can be predicted, where do you fit in? That breath you just took, was it yours? Or did the demon already expect it? That stray thought you had this morning, the one you told no one, was it spontaneous? Or just the inevitable flicker of neurons following a cosmic script? If this mind, this demon, exists, then maybe we don't. At least, not in the way we think we do. Not as free agents, not as souls that choose, but as dominoes, falling in line, believing we leapt. And that's where the fear settles, in the silence of inevitability, in the thought that wonder might be an illusion. But then, like a soft knock on the door of that idea, comes science. Modern physics shrugs off this perfect prediction. Quantum uncertainty cracks the neat floorboards beneath the demon's feet. You see, in the quantum world, nothing is quite certain. Particles don't follow a script, they play jazz. And chaos theory, our reminder from nature herself, whispers, even in systems we do understand, a flap of wings in Brazil might mean a storm in Texas. Uncertainty is not a bug, it's the essence. So even if Laplace's demon sits somewhere, watching, calculating, it cannot see the glimmer in your eye before you fall in love. It cannot trace the precise path of a teardrop before it forms. Let yourself soften into that. Would you really want a life where everything is known ahead of time? Where no surprise, no goosebumps, no sudden laughter ever catches you off guard? What gives life its spark, truly? Is it the knowing or the not knowing? Perhaps, like Zeno's tortoise, always just a step ahead of Achilles, wonder is meant to remain slightly out of reach, a gift that unfolds only when we don't know what comes next, when we surrender to the beautiful blur of uncertainty. So as you lie here, breathing quietly into the folds of this night, let go of needing to solve it. Let Laplace's demon keep his knowledge. You instead can keep the magic, because somewhere between certainty and chaos is where dreaming begins. And now, turn gently. Another door appears. It's marked with a paradox older than logic itself, because next we'll ask, what if logic breaks itself? But for now, just rest. You are allowed to not know. Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem. If your eyes are getting heavy, that's okay. You can drift and return. These thoughts will still be here, flowing like a quiet river in the dark. No pressure to hold on. Just float with me. For a moment, a library. Not just any library, but one built from pure logic. Each book is a proof, each sentence a rule. This library was the dream of mathematicians for centuries, a place where truth was neat, complete, and beautifully self-contained. In this library, everything could be explained. Everything had a reason, a method, a name. And then, a soft breath of contradiction whispered between the shelves. His name was Kurt Gödel, and with a stroke of genius wrapped in humility, he walked into this library of certainty and gently turned off the lights. He proved something that no one expected, that within any logical system complex enough to include simple arithmetic, there will always be truths that can never be proven within that system. Like a room with corners you can see, but never touch. You know they're there. But the path to reach them is missing. It's called Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem, but that name hardly captures the quiet earthquake it set off. The dream of a complete mathematics, a flawless system that could explain itself, collapsed under the weight of this insight. Gödel showed us that no matter how airtight the logic, how perfect the structure, there will always be cracks that reason can't seal. Let that settle for a moment. Even in math, our most sacred pursuit of truth, there are places we can't reach. Not because we're not smart enough, but because the system itself is built with blind spots. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's a feature, because when the sharpest tools in our mind, logic, proof, language, fail to grasp the whole, something else steps forward. Intuition, faith, a deep stillness that doesn't scream to be explained. A knowing without knowing, the same way you recognize love in a glance before you name it, or how a sunset moves you before your brain can describe the colors. Gödel didn't break mathematics. He reminded us it was alive. He didn't burn the library. He showed us the beauty of its shadows. The map, he whispered, is never the territory, and the symbols we use to chase truth are not truth itself. So, as you rest here, somewhere between knowing and sleep, ask yourself softly, do you need every answer tonight? Or is it enough to feel safe inside the question? Because maybe wisdom doesn't live in what we prove. Maybe it hums beneath what we can't. Like music in a language no one speaks, but everyone feels. Earlier we met Laplace's demon, who tried to know everything. Gödel now tells us, even demons have limits. Even perfect minds must bow to mystery. So breathe, not because you understand, but because you don't have to. And as we leave this quiet cathedral of thought, let's look somewhere new, not within the mind, but above it, to the stars, not with wonder, but with loneliness. The Fermi Paradox. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels watched, not by eyes, but by possibilities. You're lying there, maybe on your back, maybe half-curled toward a pillow, and your thoughts, like tiny spacecraft, begin to drift, upward, outward, into the black sea above the ceiling, above the clouds, above the atmosphere. They hover where stars live, and then it hits you. That gentle ache behind the question no one can answer. If the universe is so vast, why does it feel like we're the only ones here? This is what physicists call the Fermi Paradox. It's not a riddle meant to be solved with math alone. It's a hum in the chest, a whisper behind the stars. Because the numbers say life should be out there, billions of planets, billions of chances. Statistically speaking, we shouldn't be alone. So why silence? Maybe we're early. Maybe Earth is the first domino in a long chain not yet begun to fall. Or maybe they're out there, but watching, hidden, waiting for us to become something we haven't yet become. Or maybe, and this is the shadowy thought that curls like smoke around the edges of the mind, maybe they were there once, bright and burning. But every civilization has a self-destruct button, and most eventually press it. It's not just a question of astronomy. It's a mirror held up to our own survival. Because hidden inside the stars is a challenge. Can we make it further than those who came before, if they ever came at all? This paradox doesn't just whisper about aliens. It whispers about us, about our fragility, our arrogance, our longing to connect. Because whether or not there's anyone else out there, the silence pulls something from us. A strange kind of ache, like a song that almost begins but never finds its melody. It's not just the absence of others, it's the confrontation with our own echo. That what we long for may not be out there, but in here, unmet. Sometimes we stare at the night sky, not to find answers, but to find someone else looking back. But all we find is stillness. And yet, what if that stillness isn't hollow? What if it's pregnant with meaning, a kind of silence that's not emptiness, but invitation? Not the absence of life, but a waiting room before the door opens. Like Zeno's slow tortoise or the mirror behind the clock, we're always chasing something. Progress, peace, presence that just slips ahead. Perhaps the universe does the same, offering wonder just out of reach. And maybe, just maybe, that unreachable wonder is the point. Because in that wonder, we stop pretending we're in control. We remember we're small. Yes, small, but not insignificant. A grain of thought in a cosmos of questions, a flicker of life with the capacity to ask. So lie back. Let that silence wrap around your ribs. You don't have to fill it. You don't have to understand it. You only have to feel it. The ache of being conscious, the gift of asking, the intimacy of not knowing. And now, as we float farther from stars into something stranger, the question changes shape. The loneliness of outer space folds inward. The telescope becomes a mirror. What if this isn't space at all? What if none of it is? What if this breath, this bed, this brain is just a simulation? A soft shell reality wrapped around a dream? You don't have to decide. You're allowed to drift. That's what this journey is for. Not to find answers, but to feel the questions. Close your eyes. Let it be enough. We'll go deeper. Together. The simulation hypothesis. There's a peculiar stillness that comes just before sleep, the kind where thoughts stretch like fog across a midnight lake, barely holding shape before dissolving. And into that quiet, we can lower a question. Not loud, just light enough to drift. What if this life isn't quite what it seems? What if the breath you're taking right now, the slow, effortless inhale, exists not in a world, but in a simulation? This is not science fiction. Not entirely. It's a thought experiment, most famously whispered into modern minds by philosopher Nick Bostrom. He suggested something bold, yet strangely reasonable, that if any civilization, anywhere in the cosmos, ever becomes advanced enough to simulate consciousness, then they probably will. And if they do, they wouldn't just make one simulated world. They'd make thousands, millions even, for research, for curiosity, or maybe just for entertainment. And statistically, that means the odds of you and me being part of the original base reality are surprisingly slim. Now don't panic. This isn't the Matrix. There are no red pills here. In fact, it changes nothing and changes everything. Because the simulation hypothesis isn't about proving we're fake. It's about examining what real actually means. Close your eyes for a second. Feel your breath rising and falling. Notice your heartbeat, steady and grounded. If a simulation can produce sensations this vivid, emotions this deep, does it matter what the source is? If you laugh with someone, if you ache when they leave, if you look at the sky and feel small in the best possible way, then haven't you lived? It's a paradox, much like Zeno's race, where motion is sliced into infinite moments. Just as Achilles chases the tortoise in an endless pursuit that feels real but challenges our understanding of progress, this too is a chase, not for truth, but for trust. Trust in your own experience. Trust that what you feel is enough. The heart of this idea isn't disorientation, it's clarity. It's the gentle realization that maybe real is simply what we believe with our whole selves, and belief, as fragile and subjective as it seems, is what makes a sunrise beautiful, a hug meaningful, and a memory worth keeping. So even if we are dreams within dreams, or code within code, our moments still shimmer, our pain still matters, our kindness still ripples outward, felt and remembered. And maybe that's the deeper invitation here, not to escape the simulation, but to treat it with reverence. If this is a dream, then dream gently. Don't crash through it in fear. Float through it in wonder. If it's a game, then play it kindly. Don't hoard the rules. Share the joy. If the code allows for compassion, let that be your highest score. Because here you are, listening, breathing, wondering. Whether or not the walls around you are made of atoms or algorithms, that experience, right here, is yours. And maybe that's the only reality that truly matters. So tonight, as your thoughts dissolve into the hush of rest, let this linger like a lullaby echoing through soft circuits. You are here, not by accident, not by glitch, but with purpose, whether written in stars or software. Now, let's flip the question. Not, why are we here? But, why does this universe, real or rendered, allow us at all? The Anthropic Principle. Are we here because the universe lets us be? Somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, there's a question that doesn't echo, it absorbs. Why is everything just right? Not too hot, not too cold, not too fast, not too slow. As if the universe was whispering your name long before you knew how to listen. The stars burn at just the right temperature. Gravity holds, but doesn't crush. Atoms cling, but don't suffocate. It's precise, impossibly so. And yet, the answer we're offered is a shrug dressed in logic. Of course the universe works. If it didn't, you wouldn't be here to wonder. And somehow, that answer feels like both a door and a mirror. You pause, not because you're lost, but because you've stumbled into a room where reality stares back. Is the universe shaped for you? Or are you just a question mark, riding a breeze through the cosmos? Maybe you're not here because it was meant. Maybe you're here because you can be. Like a single flame dancing in a stormless cave, your existence doesn't need to explain itself to be real. And here comes the paradox again. Soft, not sharp. If the universe makes you possible, then what if you are the very way the universe confirms its own existence? You are not a visitor. You are the telescope it grew to see itself, a breath woven into a galaxy's dreaming lung, a thought wrapped in warm starlight. You don't have to chase meaning here. Just float in the quiet absurdity of being. Let yourself blur at the edges. Let the thought fade like steam on a mirror. Let the certainty dissolve. You're not failing to find the answer. You are the answer, resting. And now, sink gently into the deeper sea beneath that thought. Because what if you were never truly part of this universe? What if you were a momentary ripple in its skin, the delicate crease on reality's brow as it wonders what it means to feel? Close your eyes, and if you fall asleep now, let the universe keep asking. Boltzmann Brains. There's a hush that falls over the mind when it begins to wonder not about what's around it, but about whether around even exists at all. In that quiet, between two slow breaths, the question emerges gently, without demand. What if you're not really here? Not in the way you think, at least. Far beyond the curve of the Milky Way, deeper than any telescope has seen, space lies still. not because it's empty, but because it's waiting. And in that infinite stretch, where time stretches and probability swirls like fog, particles drift with no destination. But randomness, given infinite time, can do strange things. It can dance itself into structure. And perhaps, just perhaps, it can weave together you, not your body, not your life, not the long string of birthdays and heartbreaks and favorite songs, but just the idea of them, a single brain, suspended in the void, fully formed, with memories that never happened and a self that was never born. This is the heart of the Boltzmann Brain Paradox. It doesn't shout its presence. It doesn't want to convince. It simply whispers. Statistically speaking, isn't a floating mind more likely than an entire universe? Pause. Let that sink in. Because if that's true, if this moment is just an echo inside a mind that flickered into being from cosmic static, then what is real? Your childhood bedroom, the smell of coffee, the warmth of a friend's laugh? Or are they all just shadows cast by neurons that never truly fired? Don't panic. Even physicists don't take it literally. The idea wasn't meant to be believed. It was meant to be felt, to stretch your understanding of reality like a soft thread pulled gently until it nearly snaps. It's a thought experiment, not a prophecy. And like Zeno's endless race or the mirror in the simulation, its power is not in its truth, but in the reflection it creates. You might remember another moment, when we wondered whether motion itself was an illusion. That same hush is here now, because this, too, is a stillness wearing the costume of chaos. Whether you are a brain born from dust or a soul nested in skin, the breath you just took still filled your chest. The world you see might be imagined, but the feeling, the exhale, that was yours. You exist, somehow. That's enough. No need to hold tighter than that. And in case your thoughts begin to drift again, if your mind tries to climb the ladder of real versus not real, let it. Let it wander like a child in a hall of mirrors. You'll find that every reflection, every echo, eventually circles back to one simple fact. You are aware. And isn't that the strangest, most miraculous thing of all? So rest in that. Let your thoughts stretch like ripples across a dark lake. Let yourself drift, even if part of you wonders whether you're drifting at all. Because whether this is a dream or a dream within a dream, you're still here with me. And just beyond this paradox, something colder waits, not to frighten you, but to remind you. Even thoughts born from nothing carry weight. Let's go there, gently.
The Doomsday Argument. There's a strange hush in the air when the mind stumbles across a question it can't quite hold. It doesn't panic. It pauses. The kind of pause you feel in a quiet museum hallway, standing in front of a painting that looks like it's looking back. That's the feeling the Doomsday Argument brings. Not fear, exactly, but a faint ache, a whisper in the background. What if we're closer to the end than the beginning? The idea comes wrapped in logic, cold, mathematical, unblinking. If you are just one among all humans who will ever live, and the total number is finite, then chances are, statistically, you're somewhere near the middle. Not the start, not the final breath, but that soft, unsettling midpoint, like the flicker of lights in a theater. Act 1 has passed, intermission is ending, and now the curtain rises on Act 2, already halfway written. It's Bayesian reasoning, they say. A probabilistic mirror reflecting back the possibility that the future is shorter than we want it to be. But something in us resists. Because you're not just a number. You're not a point in a spreadsheet or a name on a long list. You're someone who cries at movies, and laughs at the wrong moments and stares too long at sunsets. Surely that must count for something. This is where the paradox sharpens, not into despair, but into a question that glows in the dark. Does knowing the story might end soon make your page more important or less? Maybe you've already heard this rhythm before, the gentle echo of Zeno's paradox, where progress never quite arrives, or the flicker of the Boltzmann brain, where your very thoughts could be sparks born from nothing. The Doomsday Argument dances in the same hidden ballroom, a logic puzzle draped in existential velvet. But logic doesn't own the final word, because even if we are halfway through, even if humanity is closer to dusk than dawn, that doesn't make this moment meaningless. In fact, it might make it sacred. There's something deeply human in the way we hold a moment tighter when we know it's passing. A hug that lasts longer, a conversation that lingers, a pause before turning off the light. And perhaps, like in those everyday requests, we whisper not for grand effect, but for gentle permission, meaning itself blooms not from length, but presence. Even a short story can be your favorite one. Even a single page can carry the weight of 1,000. So breathe in this page. You are here now, not by mistake, not by random chance, but because this is your part in the script. And whether or not you ever know where in the story you fall, beginning, middle, or end, you still get to shape the tone of your scene. Let it be poetry. And then ask yourself softly, as if turning the next page in a dream, what if your scene is being played out in infinite theaters all at once? The Multiverse Paradox. Somewhere, a version of you never left that room. Somewhere else, a version stayed. In another sliver of reality, you said yes instead of no. You stayed silent instead of speaking. Or perhaps you finally said what you meant, and everything changed. The idea of the multiverse isn't science fiction here. It's not about capes or cinematic timelines. It's a quiet, psychological mirror that whispers, what if every fork in your path created another road that still exists? A parallel breath, a mirrored self, a life you almost lived, still unfolding somewhere beyond reach. And yet, even this vastness doesn't make you smaller. It makes you more, not less real, but richly plural. Because somewhere in this infinite garden of lives, you are thriving, failing, laughing, mourning, all at once. Every unlived choice still echoes, not as guilt, but as possibility. And in that possibility, regret begins to melt like frost under morning light. You might remember the earlier paradox, like the one where the tortoise always stays ahead, no matter how fast Achilles runs. In the multiverse, the tortoise is not ahead. It simply split off. It became its own story, with its own weather and light. And so did you. But if every version of you exists, does that mean this one doesn't matter? Number. It means this version, this thread of being, is sacred, because this is the version where you're breathing, where your heart has chosen this rhythm, this pain, this joy, this ordinary Tuesday, and that makes it irreplaceable. Take a breath, not to escape this universe, but to sink more deeply into it. Let your breath be a declaration. I am here. I am the version that stayed, the one with eyes open, listening. Listening not for the other worlds, but for this one. There is something beautiful in the stillness of commitment. Not because other paths don't exist, but because you are walking this one now. And in this presence, there is power, not dominance, but clarity. Like the hush that falls backstage before the curtains rise, when someone whispers, "You're the perfect energy for this audience." And you believe it, not because it's loud,
but because it's true. So if your mind begins to drift, let it. Wandering is a feature, not a flaw. The other versions of you are not interruptions. They are echoes of how richly layered your mind truly is. And when the stars return to your imagination, scattered like questions across a dark ceiling, ask gently, why does the night sky still feel so quiet, even with infinite worlds above? That's where we're going next. But for now, just feel the gravity of this breath. You don't have to stay awake. You can float, drift, return whenever you're ready. The multiverse isn't running away. It's waiting, patiently, just like you. Olbers Paradox. At first glance, it feels like a simple question, a child's question maybe, asked from the back seat during a quiet drive home. If the universe is infinite, why is the night sky dark? And yet, hidden inside that innocent curiosity is a doorway, one that opens not into answers, but into awe. Imagine it with me. An endless sky painted with billions, no, trillions of stars. If they stretch forever in all directions, then why doesn't every corner of our vision blaze with their light? Why isn't the night sky bright, like a sun that never sets? This is the mystery known as Olbers Paradox. It's not just about astronomy, it's about expectation. Because logically, in a static eternal universe where stars go on without end, every direction we look should end in light. The sky should be a flood of brightness. Yet we sit beneath a velvet canopy of darkness, pierced by only a few quiet sparks. And here is the soft truth. The universe had a beginning. It's not eternal. It's still unfolding. Light from the most distant stars hasn't reached us yet. Some of it never will. The fabric of space itself is stretching, pulling light into invisibility, like a whispered memory that fades before you can grasp it. This darkness is not a failure. It's a reminder. Even in a cosmos filled with fire, there are spaces untouched. Even where there should be noise, there is silence. You don't have to be everywhere at once to matter. You don't have to shine to be seen. At a quiet table by a window, someone once asked, "If the sky is so full of stars, why does it make me feel alone?" And the barista, almost without thinking, replied, "Because you're seeing the light from the past, but standing in the present." The night sky isn't a blank canvas. It's a mirror, reflecting all the moments that haven't arrived yet. It tells you that being surrounded by brilliance doesn't mean you have to perform, that it's okay to rest, that even the brightest things can exist in silence. Let the darkness hold you now. Don't resist it. It's not emptiness, it's potential. It's space to breathe, to stretch, to dream. And yet, even dreams drift. Even stars, bold as they are, burn out in time. So stay with me as we float a little farther. The night isn't over. The final whisper of the universe is waiting. The heat death of the universe. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't come from turning down the volume, but from the universe itself running out of sound. A silence not born of stillness, but of everything winding down. This is the heat death of the universe. Not a cataclysm, not a bang, but a hush so vast it swallows even time. At first, it's easy to picture endings as dramatic, planets colliding, stars exploding in one final fiery gasp. But the truth, the more probable truth, is quieter. It's not fire, it's not rage, it's surrender. Entropy reaching its peak, every particle finally at rest. No more heat, no more motion, just a vast cosmic exhale, and then stillness. Somewhere in the dark, you might find yourself asking, so that's it? After all this, just silence? And maybe that's what makes it unsettling. Not that it ends, but that it ends without applause. No closing line, no crescendo, just a slow dimming of the lights. Science tells us this isn't fantasy. It's the most likely destiny of everything. Galaxies drift too far apart. Stars burn out, one by one, like the last guests leaving a party, and nothing replaces them. Not because they were destroyed, but because everything simply ran out, ran down. And isn't that the strangest comfort? That in the end, it's not pain that waits, but balance. No more pushing, no more striving, just enough. Every motion fulfilled, every possibility played out. You might be tempted to resist the image, to clutch onto fire and light, but pause for a second. What if peace isn't found in permanence, but in acceptance? The tree lets go of its leaves not because it fails, but because it knows its time. Behind the curtain of all that is, behind time itself unraveling into flatness, there might be something even more profound. Maybe not an answer, but a presence. Like someone backstage, watching the final scene, whispering, "You held the role beautifully. Now rest." Somewhere along the edge of thought, that's when the tension fades. That quiet recognition. Not everything must be eternal to matter. Even the grandest stories, the ones that shaped galaxies and memories, end not with a roar, but a whisper. And maybe that whisper sounds a little like your own breath right now. Software rhythmic, willing to release. So if the universe itself teaches us how to stop, gently, gracefully, couldn't we listen? Even in our smallness, couldn't we learn to let go just for tonight? No need to stay awake for the next line. No need to chase the next thought. If your eyes are heavy, that's okay. You can drift. You can return later. The stars will wait. And if reality is only a veil, perhaps it was never meant to be clutched, only touched, and then released. Maya, the illusion of reality. Is this all just a beautiful veil? The room feels soft tonight, not for its furniture or lights, but because something in you has loosened, like a thread that's been pulled just enough to make the fabric of your certainty ripple. The voice in your head has grown quieter. You're not trying to understand everything, just noticing. They say reality is the stage, but what if it's only the curtain? From ancient Hindu and Buddhist wisdom comes the idea of Maya, a word that doesn't simply mean illusion, but the dance of form, color, sound, the play of everything that convinces us this is all there is. A breeze brushes your cheek, and you think of the wind. But what if it's only a memory moving through you? What if the things we touch are just echoes of something deeper? A man at a train station once looked up from his book and asked gently, "Do you ever feel like this moment already happened before?" Not in déjà vu, but as if the world's been trying to tell you something in different voices, over and over. You nodded, but you weren't sure why. You were born into a stage already set, a family, a language, a sky. You didn't ask for these clothes, but you wear them, don't you? They feel familiar, like a dream you kept walking into. And yet, even dreams shift beneath your feet when you start to notice the seams. The mind can't help but build its own stories. It paints permanence onto passing clouds. It turns a whisper into a whole identity. But somewhere in the space between inhale and exhale, between what you feel and what you assume, there's a crack. Through it, something timeless hums. A teacher once asked softly, "If everything around you disappeared, would you still remain?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was an invitation. You see, this question, is this real, has haunted philosophers across ages. Plato's cave spoke of shadows. The Matrix turned code into meaning. Even modern science flirts with simulation, asking, are we living inside a story written by rules we can't touch? Maybe the point was never to escape the illusion, but to see it for what it is. You don't need to shatter the dream to wake up. You simply need to let go of your grip on it. Think of that moment before waking, when your body is still resting, but your awareness has returned. You remember the dream, but it no longer holds you. What if life could feel like that? Lightly worn, loosely held, no longer clung to like armor. Now pause, gently, with no rush. What part of your life have you mistaken for permanent? Is it the way someone looks at you? The job you think defines you? The sadness you think will last forever? Let them drift like clouds across the mind's sky. Let them change, because they will. And maybe that's the secret, not to fear the illusion, but to dance within it, knowing it's a stage of stars and shifting light. Someone whispers at the edge of your thoughts, you're doing just fine, even now. You're allowed to sleep, to not know, to dream, and to ask, without needing the answer. What if this too is a dream within a dream? And now, we go inward, into the veil itself, into the flicker behind your eyelids, where the question still lingers. How do you know? You're not dreaming right now. Let go. You can always return. The Dream Argument. The room grows still. Even the ticking clock forgets to measure time for a moment. And in that breath of silence, a question floats gently across your awareness, one posed centuries ago by Descartes, yet still echoing in the quiet chambers of thought today. What if you're not awake? What if this is only a dream pretending to be real? A gust of wind brushes the curtain, as if the world itself shivers at the uncertainty. In our sleep, our senses become puppets, moved by stories that vanish by dawn. We taste food that was never cooked. We cry over losses that never lived. And when we wake, we call it just a dream. But if sleep can fool us so fully, then who's to say waking isn't another mask? A soft laugh nearby. Someone leans closer and asks, if I told you this world was stitched together by your thoughts, would you still call it real? Lucid dreamers have danced in midair, shaped mountains with a blink, spoken to memories with faces. They've stood before the subconscious like an audience watching a one-man play. And in those dreams, it feels real, so vivid, so charged with emotion. So if they never woke up, would they even know? A street lamp flickers outside. Maybe it's trying to tell you something. Maybe it's just a glitch in your dream. Or maybe, just maybe, the glitch is you. Philosophy, with its candle held high in the dark, can only illuminate so much. Descartes looked for a floor beneath all floors, a truth untouched by illusion. But perhaps there is no bottom, just layers of waking, like mist rising from a lake, each more transparent than the last. There's no need to panic. You don't need to jolt yourself awake. That's not the invitation here. You're not being asked to escape the dream, only to breathe within it. The awareness alone is enough. It transforms the cage into a garden, the mirror into a window. And now, this moment, whether it's carved from consciousness or from sleep, it belongs to you. Not because it's real, but because you feel it, because in some quiet, unspoken way, it's yours. A gentle voice in the back of your mind murmurs, does it matter if it's a dream? If you're still moved by the beauty of it? Stillness returns. The thought lands like a feather on water, not with certainty, but with peace. Let's continue, because some questions weren't meant to be answered. They were meant to dissolve the rigid walls of reason, to slip between thought and breath, and what lies ahead is something even more delicate. The poetry of paradox, the smile of Zen, a truth that doesn't shout, but bows. Zen Koans. There are questions that do not ask to be answered, they ask to be felt, like the quiet riddle of a breeze brushing against only one cheek, or a candle flickering in a room with no wind. A Zen koan does not invite you to solve it, it dares you to become it. The old monk once whispered, "When both hands clap, there is sound." What is the sound of one hand? That question doesn't echo through logic. It hums beneath it, like a string too loose to play, yet too tight to ignore. It lingers in the gap between understanding and surrender. And perhaps you've felt this before, standing at the edge of a conversation where words no longer reach, or during a sleepless night, staring at a ceiling that offers no answers. A stranger at a tea shop might lean over and ask gently, "Have you ever heard silence so loud it bends the room?" You would nod, though you wouldn't know why. Koans aren't puzzles. They are doors that only open when you stop pushing. They loosen the knots of your thinking until something deeper slips through, something wordless. They aren't meant to make you smarter. They are meant to undo the idea that you need to be. Some say the moment you stop trying to understand the koan is the moment it begins to understand you. And isn't that how it feels when you finally stop wrestling with sleep, and sleep takes your hand like an old friend? The mind, weary of grasping, finally releases the grip, and what's left is a gentle fall. A voice in the distance, maybe from a temple you never entered, seems to ask, "If you could hear one thought echo across lifetimes, would you try to answer it, or just listen until it faded?" And here's the strange grace. When your mind goes quiet in front of a question it cannot hold, your soul sometimes speaks instead. Not in words, in warmth, in stillness, in the feeling that something just is. So let this question sit beside you tonight, like an empty chair on a quiet porch. You don't need to fill it. You don't need to solve it. Just rest near it and let it hum its soft impossibility. That too is a kind of sleep. And as your breath softens, notice the rhythm slowing, your thoughts unspooling like thread from a spool that never ends. And in that hush, a new paradox begins to rise. To seek truth is to first admit you cannot find it. Let that truth hold you for a while. No need to chase it. Just listen, like listening for the sound of one hand clapping. The Paradox of Enlightenment. There's a strange moment that comes in every seeker's path, quiet, anticlimactic, almost disappointing in its simplicity. You've walked for so long, asked so many questions, sat still in search of something grand and glowing. But what if the path you're walking was never meant to take you anywhere? What if each step you take quietly erases the ground behind you? In the dim corridor of a dreamlike train station, a stranger leans against a pillar, sipping something warm. They look up, noticing your puzzled face, and say, "You're already where you were going. You just didn't know it yet." And somehow, that sentence lands not as an answer, but as a permission to rest. Because enlightenment doesn't arrive like fireworks. It doesn't knock on your door and declare itself. In fact, it hides in plain sight, like breath, always present, always unnoticed until you stop trying to control it. The paradox is clear now. The more you chase awakening, the further you drift from it. Every "I must find it" echoes the illusion that you've been apart from it all along. This isn't punishment, it's poetry. because the very act of striving affirms distance. And distance? That's the illusion. You've been wearing the glasses you thought you lost. The map you followed was written in disappearing ink. The more you tried to decode it, the more the symbols faded. Stillness doesn't mean nothingness. It means nothing left to push against. Enlightenment isn't a state you reach. It's the gentle absence of resistance, the quiet exhale after holding your breath far too long. You're not becoming. You're being, softly, undramatically now. Someone beside a fountain whispers to no one in particular. Funny how the harder I tried to hold on to peace, the more it slipped through my fingers. But the moment I stopped grasping, it stayed. That's the heart of this paradox. The path disappears, not because it was never real, but because it was never needed. It was a bridge made of fog, enough to help you cross, but never built to last. You are not on your way. You are already home. And yet, the question remains, gently echoing in the silence. How do you release desire without desiring to release it? Stay with that question. Let it ripple through your thoughts like a bell carried on night wind. You don't need to solve it. Just let it dissolve you. And when you're ready, we'll go deeper. The paradox of letting go awaits. The paradox of detachment. There's a moment just before sleep when even your thoughts hesitate, hovering like moths circling a quiet flame. You think you've learned to let go, but beneath that stillness, a flicker, a question. Am I doing it right? Am I letting go? Enough? And suddenly, you've looped yourself back into grasping. This is the paradox of detachment. It wears the robe of surrender, but carries a subtle tension, folded neatly beneath its seams. A soft voice, maybe from across the room or from somewhere inside, leans in as if you've just confessed something. Even the desire to be free can be a chain in disguise. There's no shame in that, only a tender recognition that sometimes we're not trying to let go. We're trying to win at letting go, trying to be the one who detaches faster, cleaner, with less pain. The spiritual ego knows how to mimic stillness. It whispers, "You're doing great. You've released." But its eyes are watching the mirror, wondering if peace looks good on you. You may find yourself in a quiet place, eyes closed, breath soft, telling yourself, "I let go. I surrender." And still, somewhere in your chest, a knot that waits to be noticed tightens ever so slightly. A gentle presence might meet you in that moment, not to correct you, not to guide you, but simply to ask, are you letting go, or are you trying to be the one who lets go? There's no pressure to answer, just notice. Letting go isn't a strategy. It's not an act of the will. It doesn't obey affirmation or intention. It arrives when it's ready, like a dusk breeze that chooses its own hour. And when it does, you'll know it not by how light you feel, but by how little you care to name it. You don't need to release. You only need to stop holding. Even now, as your breath moves through you, it shows you how. It enters. It leaves. It doesn't ask your permission. It doesn't cling to what it just was. It is the first teacher of detachment. And when you follow it, you're not doing anything. You're allowing something, not striving, not resisting, just resting. A nearby voice, neither stranger nor friend, might murmur with warmth rather than certainty, "You're already closer than you think." As you drift deeper into the folds of yourself, the next rhythm waits. The cosmic opposites, the inhale and exhale of the universe, the dance of light and shadow. We'll sit there soon, but for now, follow the breath that has already let go. It knows the way. Yin and Yang. Somewhere between the inhale and the exhale, there's a still point, a place where contradiction doesn't need solving. It just needs listening. In that quiet, you begin to feel it, that you are not only made of light, you are also formed by the shadows it casts, not in conflict, but in a dance. A gentle voice behind you might ask, if darkness were missing, would light still mean anything at all? And maybe you'd pause, not to answer, but to feel the question settle like dusk on your skin. Yin and Yang aren't fighting. They are not enemies in a cosmic war. They are lovers in the same breath. The moon doesn't chase the sun. It cradles it from the other side of the sky. In every outburst of joy, there's the faint residue of sorrow, like a violin that sings because its strings are stretched. Even in grief, there's often a strange warmth, a reminder that something mattered. And so the idea of balance becomes less about stillness, more about motion, a current, a pulse. Balance isn't standing in the middle of the scale. It's riding the wave, trusting the dip as much as the crest. At a train station, someone beside you whispers gently. Funny how we only notice the silence when the train leaves. It's that whisper, half wisdom, half passing thought, that holds the paradox. You are both, presence and absence, note and rest. Joy isn't complete without the ache it rose from. The self is never whole without its reflection in another's eyes. Even your solitude carries echoes of voices once close. And so, you learn, softly, slowly, that opposing forces don't tear you apart. They hold you together. And perhaps that's why every moment of ease tastes sweeter after a struggle. Every night holds a fragment of dawn tucked in its chest, waiting to be unwrapped. A still breeze brushes your window, and if you listen carefully, it says, you're allowed to feel both. You're allowed to be both. Inhale, receive, exhale, release. You are not either. You are both. Now, from the soul's balance to the edge of morality, if lives hung in the balance, would you pull the lever? Or is the weight of choice already choosing you? The trolley problem. A trolley barrels down a track. Ahead, 5 people are tied in place. You stand near a lever, silent, still, your fingers trembling just inches from the switch. If you pull it, the trolley diverts, saving 5 lives, but takes 1 on another track. If you don't, the 5 perish, and no one will say you caused it. But you were there. You were watching. A quiet voice beside you speaks, not to guide, but to witness. You look like someone who doesn't want to play God, but sometimes doing nothing is its own choice. The air tightens. The steel rails hum like tension held in your chest. This is not about numbers. It's about your threshold. Not what's right, but what you could live with after. Would you move the lever? Or would you let the track play out as it was already set? You stare down at your hand, not because you doubt the logic, but because your soul doesn't breathe in formulas. Ethics here is not a lesson. It's a haunting, a dilemma that doesn't test your intelligence but your burden. You hear the sound of wheels getting louder, not on tracks, but in your own mind, and you ask yourself not, what should I do? But who am I when I decide? Another voice enters, subtle and unjudging. There's no right answer, just the one that lets you sleep at night. Now the question changes. Would you rather live with the weight of action or the weight of silence? The lever or the letting go? You pause, not to decide, but to feel the weight of indecision. And in that pause, something ancient inside you exhales, something that understands the terrible beauty of moral conflict. This is where most people get stuck. Not in the scenario, but in the loop of what if, echoing endlessly in the dark corridors of the mind. You might not find peace in this moment, but you might find honesty, and sometimes that's enough. A soft curtain falls in your mind, not as an ending, but as a kind permission to rest. And just as sleep begins to brush the edges of your thoughts, a whisper drifts in. You didn't choose wrong, you chose human. Buridan's donkey. There's a kind of stillness that doesn't soothe. It lingers like fog between two lanterns, each one equally distant, equally dim. And you, in the middle, blinking slowly, unsure whether to step left or right. This is not laziness, it's the burden of rationality. Buridan's donkey, they called it, a creature that stands frozen between two identical bales of hay, unable to choose. It starves, not from lack of food, but from an overabundance of reason. You may not have hooves, but maybe you've stood there too, in front of two emails unsent, two career paths, both viable, two texts unwritten. The world doesn't always present a clear right. Sometimes everything looks equally, almost right. At a quiet train station, a voice behind you might ask, "So, which train feels more like motion than hesitation?" Modern life is a gallery of possibilities. Swipe left, scroll down. We're offered so much that our own desires begin to blur, like overexposed film. And so, we stall. We overthink. We hold out for clarity, hoping that a flash of certainty will descend and lift the fog. But here's the quiet truth. Waiting too long for the perfect choice is often the fastest way to miss life. Inaction is a decision, and often, it's the one we regret the most. A barista once smiled while you hovered over the drink menu. They're all good, but you won't taste anything if you keep thinking. There's beauty in choosing, not because one path is better, but because you made it real. Movement is how the soul remembers it's alive. And presence? That's where the meaning lives. Not in the haystack of hypotheticals, but in the moment your foot finally moves. So tonight, let go of perfect. Let go of proving. Let go of needing to know every answer before you begin. The donkey didn't die because there wasn't a good option. It died because it refused to act. And if someone near you murmured, "You don't have to be certain. You just have to be here," would that be enough to take a step? You're not alone in this. Even in silence, others are choosing beside you, quietly, clumsily, beautifully. Let this breath be the beginning. Let it carry you, not to the best choice, but to the next one. Because now, just ahead, lies a new paradox waiting. What happens when even tolerance becomes intolerable? Let's walk there, gently. The paradox of tolerance. There's a quiet tension in the heart of every free society. A fragile chord, humming beneath the promise of openness. We are told to be tolerant, to welcome different views, to listen, to allow. But somewhere deeper, beneath that noble intention, lies a paradox with sharp edges. Karl Popper once whispered a truth that still unsettles the softest of democracies. If we tolerate intolerance endlessly, we give it the tools to destroy tolerance itself. The open door we keep unlocked in the name of kindness might one day swing wide for those who intend to seal it shut. Someone walks beside you on a foggy street and asks, "Is it still tolerance if it helps silence others later?" Their voice is calm, not afraid, just curious, like they've seen this question etched onto the walls of history before. You pause, not because you don't know the answer, but because you feel the weight of the question folding into you. In your chest, a quiet realization blooms. Freedom is not just something to offer, it's something to protect, and that protection doesn't wear armor or carry a flag. Sometimes it sounds like a teacher who gently stops a harmful voice in a classroom. Sometimes it's a whisper in a town hall. This space is for conversation, not domination. Tolerance without a backbone becomes paper thin. Kindness, if left without boundaries, invites its own erosion. The fire of freedom can be smothered not by rage, but by our silence in the face of those who refuse to share the warmth. A moment lingers, a breath held in the stillness of your mind. What, truly, must we defend to keep open minds? Safe? A breeze moves through the metaphorical theater curtains, revealing not conflict, but clarity. Not all voices seek dialogue. Some only echo themselves. And when the room grows full of that noise, where will gentleness live? But let's rest now in the hush between thoughts, where softness meets strength, not in volume, but in values. The next ripple carries us back into perception. Not only what the eye welcomes, but what it filters, what it fears, and what it's never been taught to notice. Molyneux problem. A room with no light, no color, only the steady hum of awareness. This is where Molyneux problem begins. Not in the eyes, but in the mind behind them. A philosopher once asked, if a man born blind learned to distinguish a cube from a sphere by touch alone, then suddenly gained sight, would he recognize them by sight without touching them again? The question is gentle in tone, but unsettling in implication. It asks whether sight is just a mirror of the world, or a skill the mind must practice, like a melody it must learn to hum before hearing it fully. A voice, low and curious, interrupts the quiet. You've held the shapes in your hand, but have you truly seen them yet? The man blinks, not because of light, but because something unfamiliar is unfolding within him. This isn't a puzzle about eyes, it's about experience, and how much of what we call knowing is stitched together by the repetition of touching, hearing, failing, remembering. We don't learn to see by opening our eyes, we learn to see by connecting. Sight alone is raw data. Meaning is built through contact. A pause, as if someone were standing next to you, watching rain slide down a window. Funny, they say gently, how the world doesn't reveal itself all at once. Sometimes even the familiar stays hidden until we've earned the right to really see it. The mind doesn't absorb the world, it maps it. Molyneux' question, first posed in 1688, wasn't about optics, it was about trust. Can we trust what we perceive if our perception is incomplete? Can we trust our knowledge if it was never lived through? You feel the weight of the thought not in your head, but behind your chest, like someone just placed a quiet stone there. It doesn't hurt. It steadies you. There's a strange relief in realizing that even our senses can be mistaken. It means we're not broken for not understanding. We're just becoming. The cube and the sphere are more than objects. They're metaphors. One for things we've learned the hard way. The other for things still waiting in the fog. And then the question folds inward. What else have you been touching all your life, but never really seen? A silence follows, not cold, but kind. It lets you sit with yourself. This paradox, so soft in its language, yet profound in its implications, pulls us into the core of epistemology. Do we truly know anything before we've lived it? Can truth be taught, or must it be felt first, like fingers grazing the ridges of reality? As your breathing slows, you feel as if you're walking through a museum of unopened rooms in your mind. Behind each door is a color you've heard about, but never truly perceived. Molyneux's problem isn't solved with a yes or no. It's solved over a lifetime of slowly learning to see what's always been there. In the distance, the next corridor opens. A sign flickers with faint golden letters, as if written in breath on glass. Not just meaning, but the meaning of meaning. You step forward, lighter now. The question lingers, but no longer feels like a riddle. It feels like a companion. The meaning of meaning. There's a moment, just before sleep, when the words in your mind begin to dissolve. You're no longer thinking in sentences, only drifting through impressions. The room around you fades into soft outlines, and even your name feels like something borrowed. That's where we begin. Because meaning isn't what we think it is. Language, for all its poetry, is a tool made of shadows. A word is never the thing itself. It's a symbol, a whisper thrown across the canyon between you and me, hoping it lands somewhere familiar. But what happens when it doesn't? A teacher once leaned in during a quiet afternoon and asked gently, "When you say I'm fine, are you ever really fine?" That question didn't need an answer. It echoed deeper than any response could reach. Because sometimes it's not that we lie, it's that we don't have the words we need. Not for grief, not for desire, not even for joy. Language is a bridge, yes, but when misused or misunderstood, it becomes a wall, one we build brick by brick with misunderstood metaphors and fragile guesses. One person says love, and they mean safety. Another hears love and feels fear. The same word, different worlds. In the gentle silence between thoughts, we start to feel what Wittgenstein warned us about. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. If that's true, then what world are you trapped in right now? A world where should means shame, where sorry is just habit, where help is too heavy to say out loud. You pause, you breathe. A passing voice behind you at the bookstore mumbles, "That word doesn't mean what you think it means." You turn slightly, unsure if it was meant for you or if it was meant for anyone at all. But it stays, because deep down, you know, the pain you carry might not be because you feel too much, but because you can't explain what you feel at all. And that silence, that unnamed ache, is the true exile. Yet here's the paradox. Even as words fall short, they are all we have to reach one another. So we whisper carefully. We choose gentleness over precision. We say, "I'm listening," even when we don't fully understand. And in doing so, we let meaning rise, not from vocabulary, but from presence. A violin doesn't speak, but you know when it's mourning. A breeze doesn't explain, yet you sense when it carries longing. So tonight, if you find yourself drifting, lost between unsaid things, rest in that space. Let the meanings float. Let them be unfinished. And when silence comes, don't fill it. Don't race to define it. Let it speak. Let it be the one voice that never misuses a word. Now gently, we return. Back to the stardust questions that never quite sleep. Where does language begin? And where does it end? And more curiously, what existed before the first word was spoken? Maybe tonight, the answer arrives not in a sentence, but in a sigh. The edge of the universe. There's a moment right before you fall asleep when your thoughts seem to drift past the edge of what feels real, like walking barefoot to the very edge of a dream and staring down into a place where reason loses its grip. That's where we begin. The universe may be infinite, or it may curve back on itself like a soft whisper chasing its own echo. Some scientists believe we might never reach the truth, not because we lack tools, but because there may be no beyond to find, no curtain to pull back, no door to open, just the end of language itself. In a nearly empty planetarium, a voice once asked quietly behind you, "If you could walk to the edge of everything, what would you expect to see?" You paused, unsure whether to answer aloud. And maybe that's the point. When we ask where the universe ends, we're really asking, where do we end? Is the self contained to skin, to breath, to heartbeat? Or is it more like a ripple that goes unnoticed until it touches the edge of someone else's thought? It's strange how the human mind craves boundaries. We draw lines on maps, put fences around gardens, and press full stops at the end of sentences, as if endings make things safer, clearer, easier to hold. But what if reality has no end at all? No neat border, no edge to stand on and look over. A quiet voice in a dark hallway might say, "Sometimes I wonder if we're scared of endlessness because we can't control what we can't contain." And you, still lying there in your bed, begin to feel it. That infinity isn't a number. It's a sensation, a soft expanding stretch behind your eyes, the subtle ache of a question that never quite lands. Close your eyes gently. You're not falling behind. You're just floating forward into a space that doesn't need answers. You don't need to reach the edge. Because sometimes, the most haunting silence doesn't come from the stars or the void, but from the divine. And if tonight you hear nothing at all, maybe that's still something. Maybe silence is the sound of the infinite whispering back. Stay as long as you need. Drift if you wish. You can return any time. The silence of God. The silence of God. Why doesn't the universe answer? A hush settles over the world when you lie in the dark, not yet asleep, but no longer awake. You wait for a sign, a sound, a shimmer of something divine breaking through the stillness. But nothing comes. Just the breathing of your chest and the soft hum of your thoughts. That's when the question stirs. Why doesn't the universe answer me back? There is a kind of ache in this quiet, not a sharp pain, but a dull weight. You reach out to something beyond, not always with words, sometimes with a feeling, a silent prayer, a breath that carries more longing than language could, and still, nothing replies. A man once sat beside a river for hours, tossing pebbles into the current. Each ripple carried his hopes downstream. After the 100th stone, he whispered, "Is anyone even listening?" A passing stranger paused, met his eyes gently, and said, "Maybe the river is the answer. Maybe it always was." Divine silence is one of the oldest paradoxes. If there's a creator, why hide? If meaning exists, why remain veiled? Yet some say that the silence isn't absence. It's not the back of a turned shoulder. It's the space we're given to listen inwardly, to grow without certainty. Could it be that the answer is not delayed, but rephrased in the language of stillness? Could silence itself be the reply? A child once asked her grandmother, "Why won't God talk to me?" The old woman didn't speak for a while. Then she placed a hand over the child's chest and said, "He already does, but not with lips, with presence." What if God doesn't shout, because the whisper is already inside you? A warmth that rises when you do the right thing, even when no one sees. A pull in your gut when you stray too far from who you are. A quiet knowing when you're safe. These things are not loud. They do not demand attention. They invite it. Sometimes, not knowing becomes its own kind of faith. You don't hold on to certainty, but trust, like walking a path lit only one step at a time. Is that silence? Or is it a deeper form of speech? So if you're lying there tonight, asking the sky to speak, know that maybe it already did, in the way the air feels when you breathe deep, in the goosebumps that rise when a truth brushes past you, in the pause between thoughts where peace quietly lives. Let the silence be sacred. Let it be a friend, not a void. Let the not knowing be enough, just for now. Because sometimes the most profound answers come when we stop demanding them. A soft voice in your memory leans close and asks, if you could ask just one question, only one, to the universe, to God, or to the void, what would it be? And maybe, just maybe, the question itself is the doorway. The final question. There's a hush that settles in the room when the lights go out. The day releases its grip, and in the dark, something ancient stirs behind your ribs. A quiet question, not loud, not frantic, just there, waiting. You feel it, don't you? A tug behind your sternum, like a hand brushing a curtain open from the inside. A stranger on the train once turned to me and asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you ever wonder why anything exists at all?" No context, no warning, just that. I looked at them, stunned, not by the question, but by how familiar it felt, as if they had spoken aloud something I'd been mouthing silently my entire life. Maybe your question is different. Maybe it's not about the universe or death. Maybe it's softer. Did I ever truly belong to someone? Was I seen, even once, without having to perform? It doesn't shout, this question. It hums, low and warm and infinite. Some sit beneath stars, searching for something older than memory. Others stand in showers, letting water pretend to wash away what's actually stuck deeper. The feeling of being untethered. And when someone finally pauses and asks, "Did I matter?" It's not about ego. It's about echo. Did your presence ripple through even one heart before it faded? You don't need to answer it. You're not being tested. Because sometimes, just asking a question allows the heart to exhale. It's like opening a window in a room that's been sealed too long. Even if the air is still, it smells like permission. Someone once leaned over to me during a quiet evening and said, "I think the universe hears the questions we whisper before sleep, not to solve them, but to sit beside us while we wonder." I believed them. So ask, even if the words catch in your throat. Ask, even if the only one listening is your own pulse. What question lives quietly in your chest tonight? Does it have a name, a face, or just a feeling? And now, take a breath with me. Feel the weight of the question soften, not disappear. Just soften. And what if, just what if? This entire journey you've taken tonight, every thought, every metaphor, every memory that surfaced like a lantern rising in water, what if you've taken it before? Would you remember? Or would the déjà vu simply be your soul smiling quietly, as if to say, "You're almost home"? Sleep now is not an ending. It's a return. The loop. There's a moment, right between waking and sleeping, when your mind slows down just enough for the questions to slip through. Not the loud questions, the ones that demand answers, but the soft ones, the kind that arrive like a breeze through a curtain, brushing your skin before you even notice. Have you been here before? Not just here in this room, under these covers, but here, in this feeling, this ache of familiarity that you can't quite name. You walk into a place for the first time, and your body sighs as if it remembers. Someone calls your name and it echoes like a voice you heard in another lifetime. Could it be that time is not a straight road, but a spiral staircase? Each step takes you forward, and yet somehow returns you to the same view, just from a higher floor. You reach for something new, but your fingers brush against something ancient. The loop, as silent as breath, encircles you. A gentle voice behind you might ask, "Didn't we already talk about this?" And you find yourself unsure. Did we? Quantum cosmologies whisper about eternal recurrence, that the universe might be playing itself on repeat, recycling stardust, reshaping atoms, replaying entire lifetimes with slight edits. In some far reaches of theoretical physics, time is neither a line nor a loop, but a cloud of possibility, folding in on itself like thought. The breath you take now may have already been taken 1,000 times under different stars. You stop in your tracks, not because something blocked your path, but because something inside you remembered. A conversation, maybe. A pattern you swore you'd escaped. And yet, here you are, looping back, tracing the same emotional contours you thought you had outgrown. Someone at a cafe once leaned toward you, eyes wide with recognition. You ever get that sense that you've already lived this exact moment? And you couldn't help but nod, not because you understood it, but because it felt true. That's the paradox of the spiral. It feels like progress, yet curves inward. Each decision echoes a previous one, with slightly new conditions. Growth isn't always forward. It folds back, returns, tests you again. Even the mind does this, cycling through memories that morph and mutate, rewriting its own past just enough to keep the story feeling fresh. Memory is not a camera. It's a painting touched up with each glance. And still, within all the colors, there's a shape that repeats. Every breath is a return. Inhale, beginning. Exhale, ending. And then again. You close your eyes, and in that darkness, the loop feels less frightening, more like a rhythm, a pulse that doesn't trap you, but rocks you gently into stillness. The voice comes again, not external, not internal, just present. If everything returns, what part of you always stays? Maybe it's the witness, the quiet observer behind the curtain, the one who doesn't age, doesn't change, doesn't panic. The one who watches the wheel turn, but never clings to its edges. That still point inside you isn't trying to escape the loop. It's learning how to dance with it. So if you find yourself here again, at the same thought, the same emotion, don't rush away. Stay a moment. Let the spiral carry you inward. Because maybe the purpose was never to break the loop, but to understand why it brought you back. Sleep if you need to. Drift if you must. You can always return. The final paradox. You. Somewhere between the last thought and the next breath, you linger. Not as a name, not as a memory, but as presence. Soft, unspeakable, alive. You're not watching the story unfold. You are the quiet pulse within it. A warmth without shape, like light curling in on itself at the end of a long evening. A whisper reaches you. Someone, somewhere, says with a knowing smile, "Strange, isn't it? How we search for what we already are." And something in you loosens, not with a jolt, but with the slow grace of mist retreating from a lake at dawn. You've asked so many questions. What is purpose? Who am I? Why does it feel like there's always something missing? But listen closely now. There is no distant answer, no grand unveiling. The silence itself is holding you like an old friend, because maybe the question was never separate from the one who asked. Maybe it was always you, not the thoughts that drift and scatter like birds startled by noise, not the stories that replay like weathered film reels behind your eyes, not the mechanical rhythm of daily breath. You are the awareness that notices it all, the mirror staring gently into itself, unafraid of the reflection. Do you feel it? That quiet pull in the chest when you stop trying to understand and start simply listening? Someone stands beside you, not in the room, but in the mind, and says, "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just rest." And that moment feels more complete than 1,000 conclusions ever could. You are not separate from the paradox. You are woven into it, like a single note held too long and finally becoming music. The dream and the dreamer, folded into one. The riddle that dissolves when no one's looking. The answer that appears only when you stop asking. And when you no longer need to know, you find something softer. Not knowledge, not clarity, but presence, the fullness of just being. It asks nothing. It explains nothing. It simply is. There is nothing left to decode. No next step, no clever resolution. Only this pause, this breath. You are here, and that is enough. Let yourself fall into that knowing, the gentle gravity of peace pulling you under. No more searching, only being. The simulation. Inside the simulation, a screen flickers in the back of your mind. Soft light, no edges. You don't know who turned it on, but it's been playing for as long as you've been conscious. At first, it looks like your life. But then something blinks, almost too fast to notice. Was that another screen inside the screen? They say some dreams feel too real to be fake. But what if this one is just one layer of many? The mind touches the edge of that thought, then pulls back like a hand over flame. Nested realities, worlds inside worlds, each one just convincing enough to keep you from questioning. A voice, barely louder than a whisper, floats by. If you never left the dream, would you even want to know it wasn't real? You sit with that, and somehow it doesn't feel scary, just gentle. The way a hallway echoes in an empty museum. Recursive simulation theory tells us this might be a copy of a copy. A simulation building its own simulations, again and again, like a line of mirrors facing each other forever. And yet, here you are, breathing. A breath, slowly drawn, becomes a quiet rebellion. You might be in a dream within a dream. But this breath is yours. This heartbeat is yours. A stranger brushes past you in a quiet train station and says, "Funny, this place feels too perfect to be accidental." You nod, not because you agree, but because you've had that thought too. Maybe last night, maybe last lifetime. But here's where the mind stretches. If there's no way to tell whether this is real or not, does it even matter? What if it's not about what's true, but what you're aware of? What if the origin of reality is irrelevant and presence is everything? You take another breath. The lights don't flicker. The floor holds you steady. In this layer, whatever number it is, you are fully alive. A woman across the cafe lifts her cup and says with a smile, "We might all be simulations. But this coffee, this is real enough for me." And suddenly, it feels like the world doesn't need to be certain to be beautiful. So here's your quiet reflection. You are here, maybe on the surface of something deeper, maybe in the echo of someone else's dream, but you are here. And that means something. Let your breath be your anchor. Let the weight of your body remind you that, even in a dream within a dream, you matter. You are the still point in this spinning wheel of nested illusions. Now, before the next layer pulls you deeper, ask yourself one thing. If everything was exactly like this moment, the same faces, the same wind, the same scent of paper and light, but you were gone, what would be missing? Let that question hang, not to solve it, just to feel it, like a lullaby from a place that might not exist, but still sings to you. Anyway, the Qualia Problem. Somewhere between the sound of your own breath and the silence between thoughts lies a question too delicate for science to hold. What is it like to be you? Not what you've done today, not the name you answer to, but the texture of your being, how the morning light feels on your skin, how a distant melody makes your chest ache, or how sadness doesn't shout but hums low like a violin string in the dark. Someone once asked, "Can you describe the color red to someone who has never seen it?" And the answer slipped through the fingers like mist. Science can measure neural activity. It can name the regions of your brain that process emotion, pleasure, pain. But it cannot crawl into your body and feel the warmth behind your laughter or the ache in your chest when you remember someone who is no longer here. You are not just what fires in your neurons. You are not just a pattern. You are not even just a story. You are qualia, the unmeasurable pulse of presence. Across the street, a child bites into a ripe peach for the first time. Sticky juice drips down her chin, and she laughs. Her father smiles. But does he feel it as she does? Does he taste the same summer on his tongue? No instrument will ever say. What is it like to be her in that moment? The truth is, we will never know. You sit here now, listening, breathing, and there is something happening in you that is invisible to the world. Your heartbeat carries more than blood. It carries experience. Every moment folds in on itself like light into crystal. The smell of rain, the memory of someone's voice, the secret emotion behind your smile, they all bloom quietly in a garden no one else can enter. A stranger on a train once leaned in and asked, "Where do you go when your eyes lose focus like that?" I had no answer, but I knew they had seen a window into my qualia. The mystery is not that we are made of matter, but that matter dreams, that something as physical as a brain can make something as tender as longing. No mirror shows it. No camera captures it. It exists in you and only in you. You are not just neurons. You are poetry with skin. So pause here, just for a moment. Let the world blur. Close your eyes. Feel the quiet current under your thoughts, the heat behind your eyes, the private echo of being alive. That, right there, is something no one else will ever feel the way you do. And that is what makes you real, not the facts about your height, your age, your achievements, but the feeling of being you. And if that is true, what if the universe feels too? What if stars are not silent, but singing in a language too slow for us to hear? What if awareness is not the exception, but the rule? A barista once slid a warm cup into my hand and whispered, "I swear this coffee knows when I need it most." And I smiled, not at the logic, but the beauty of the thought. Because maybe, just maybe, the world isn't made of dead things that accidentally started thinking. Maybe the world was always feeling. And you are just one note in its symphony. Let that thought rest in you like soft snow. No need to hold it. Just feel the warmth beneath its chill. And when you drift knowing, you are not just alive, you are being. And that changes everything. Panpsychism. Is the universe alive? It begins like a whisper tucked beneath your breath, as if the silence itself were humming. Tonight's thought is older than memory and softer than sleep. What if everything around you is just slightly more awake than we ever believed? Not in the way we are, not with names or worries, but in the way trees might hold a quiet memory of sunlight, or how the ocean never seems surprised by its own waves. Panpsychism, a curious word for a tender idea that everything in the universe carries a flicker of experience. Not that rocks are writing poems or electrons are plotting futures, but that perhaps, in some elusive frequency, even the smallest particle hums with a note of being. A man once sat across from me on a park bench and asked without warning, "Do you think the wind knows when it touches us?" I smiled, unsure. He just nodded, as though the question didn't need an answer, only to be heard. That's the heart of it. Panpsychism doesn't demand proof. It invites wonder. The kind of wonder that softens your shoulders and quiets the part of your brain that always wants to label, explain, dominate. Because if awareness is not confined to brains, but diffused throughout existence, then maybe your thoughts aren't trapped in your skull. Maybe they echo through the fibers of the cosmos. Maybe, right now, the chair beneath you understands stillness better than you ever could. And that shift, subtle as breath, begins to untangle something inside. You stop seeing yourself as a separate observer, detached and floating. Instead, you feel yourself as a ripple in the tide of everything. You are not watching the universe. You are the universe opening its eyes. A street lamp flickers outside your window. Not broken, just thinking perhaps. You wonder playfully, is the light dreaming me, or am I dreaming the light? Spiritual traditions have long hinted at this. Not just that stars burn, but that they sing. Not just that forests grow, but that they remember. What if the very fabric of the cosmos weaves in experience the way a melody weaves in silence? What if time itself has feelings? Pause. Feel that? The hush behind the heartbeat. That's not emptiness. That's presence. Listening without ears. Noticing without thought. And now a question drifts like smoke into the room. If the universe is alive, do we ever really die? Because if everything is conscious, even faintly, then perhaps nothing is ever truly gone. It only changes form, like mist returning to water. Your voice, once spoken, doesn't vanish. It lingers in the air, brushing against the awareness of things you can't name. So sleep gently now. You are not alone. The world is holding you, quietly aware. And somewhere in that vast stillness, a galaxy might be watching back, not with judgment, but with the warm curiosity of a dream just beginning. And if tomorrow comes, it won't be new. It will be you, returning softly. The Paradox of Death. A cool hush folds over the hour. The lights of thought dim, and something unspoken begins to hum in the space between each breath. There's a question that doesn't shout, but lingers like fog at the edge of sleep. Where do you go when you're gone? A woman in a waiting room once asked, "Do you think energy can just disappear?" The nurse replied gently, "Not disappear. Change, maybe, like heat into light." They both sat still after that, not needing an answer, just the quiet between them. If consciousness is energy, it doesn't dissolve like sugar in tea. It transforms, maybe stretches, maybe folds inward. But where? Philosophies try to point a direction, some toward a bright rebirth, others into the still arms of the void. There are voices that call it reunion with a divine rhythm, and others that say it's a full stop. Just nothing. And here's the paradox we dance around like a fire we fear to touch. We dread death, we ache at its thought, and yet we don't know what it truly is. We speak of it in metaphors, draw it in black robes, write elegies and hymns, but it is always outside the fence of what we know. And the cruel gentleness of it is this: the moment we come to know it, we're no longer here to speak of it. A man once whispered beside a hospital bed, "I don't think he's gone." The room still feels like him. His friend placed a hand on his shoulder and said, then maybe he's not gone. Just somewhere the rest of us don't have keys to yet. What if death isn't the cliff's edge, but a doorway beneath the soil, built into the roots of our lives? What if life and death aren't opposites, but companions, taking turns holding our hand? Perhaps death doesn't arrive to erase us. Perhaps it comes to return us, like waves retreating into the ocean they never truly left. You are not a static thing. You are rhythm, breath, pulse, and pause. Death is not something foreign to your nature. It's part of your unfolding, part of your return. In the stillness, someone might lean beside you and say, "You've always been part of the cycle. You never stepped outside it." So, when all fades, what truly remains? The sound of your voice? The impression left on a hand you once held? Or is it the ripple in a thought someone else now carries, long after you've passed through? There's no final curtain here, no bold answers, just a soft retreat into the folds of mystery. And maybe that's okay. If sleep takes you now, let it. You can return to the question later. It will still be here, waiting in the silence. The silence between thoughts. There is something that hums beneath even your most tangled thoughts. Not a voice, not a whisper, just a presence. Like the dark velvet between stars, like the soft pause after a deep exhale. It doesn't ask you to do anything. It doesn't pull or push. It simply waits, always behind you, always beneath. A man once stood next to me on a train platform. He didn't say a word. We just stared ahead at the tracks, shoulder to shoulder. After a long while, he turned, eyes gentle, and asked, "Do you ever feel like the quiet knows more than the thoughts?" Then the train came, and we never spoke again. That silence, that knowing, doesn't belong to monks or mystics alone. It belongs to you too. It's not an achievement or a state to reach. It's the thing that's always been here, before every memory, before every sentence you speak in your mind, before the I even knows what to say. You might be lying in bed right now, with thoughts fluttering like moths against the nightlight of your awareness. Thoughts of tomorrow, of yesterday, of what they said, of what you could have done. But if you notice the pause between those thoughts, the quiet that holds them all, there's something there. It doesn't beg to be noticed. But when you do, it welcomes you like a home you forgot you owned. Someone backstage once whispered to a nervous performer, "You don't have to impress the quiet. It's already on your side." Maybe that's true for all of us. Maybe the quiet is not the absence of something. Maybe it's the presence of everything, without the need to name it. That space between thoughts isn't a void. It's not waiting to be filled. It's awareness itself, not the kind you think about, the kind you are when you stop trying to be anything. In that silence, there's no argument, no proving, no identity to defend, no mask to hold up. Even the seeker disappears. What remains is not a thought or a concept. It's a clarity that has no words, like waking up before language or standing still inside a breath. A child once asked, "Where do thoughts go when they end?" And the mother said, "Back to where they were born, in the silence." That answer holds more wisdom than volumes of philosophy. You don't have to force this. You don't need a technique. You don't need to chase stillness. It was never running. It has always been quietly walking beside you, just out of your field of view, waiting for the moment you slow down enough to notice. Now, rest there. Let the silence hold you, like dusk holding the last light of day. Let it remind you of what you've never lost, your awareness, unshaken by the stories that pass through it. There's no need to say more. you're already here. And now, one last step. The feather falling. You've made it through the winding maze of thought, where every corridor whispered a different truth, and every turn led not to answers, but to deeper echoes. Now, you stand at the quiet threshold where even the questions soften. There is no grand key waiting to click open the universe. There never was, and perhaps, just perhaps, there never needed to be. Someone once told you, you have to figure it all out. But tonight, in this space between waking and rest, a softer voice leans in and asks, what if there was never anything to figure out? What if you're not broken and nothing's missing? Let that question linger. Let it loosen the muscles behind your eyes. Let it ripple through the folds of your breath. You are not chasing the answer anymore. You're no longer sprinting down the staircase of logic or scaling the ladders of belief. You're simply here, suspended like a feather, free from gravity's demand to land. A quiet wind carries you now, not to conclusions, but to stillness. You are drifting through the silence that follows a long-held sigh. You are floating in the moment after release, where time forgets to measure itself. A barista, closing shop late at night, smiles as they wipe the last trace of foam from the counter. Funny, isn't it? They murmur, not looking up. We spend all day trying to create patterns in the coffee, but it's the pause that tastes the best. Your thoughts try to reach for meaning, but even they are tired now. Let them rest. Let them fold themselves quietly, like old maps. You won't need a compass where you're going. You were never meant to carry the weight of decoding everything. You were meant to witness, to wonder, to weep sometimes without explanation. Even your questions, those beautifully stubborn sparks, are allowed to rest now. Not because they've been solved, but because they've been seen, fully, gently, without demand. A voice from somewhere just beyond the edge of the dream space hums through the quiet. You don't have to reach, just fall upward. What once felt like falling is now flight. This isn't the end of your journey. It's just the hush between stories, like closing a favorite book and sitting with its echo. You'll return to the puzzles tomorrow if you wish. You'll draw new lines and follow fresh breadcrumbs. But tonight, there is no chase, no clamor, no pressure, just you and the breath and the feather. Sleep now, traveler. The paradoxes will keep. You are home. So, did the arrow ever move? Or did you simply move around it, through time, through thought, through something unnamed that only the sleeping mind can hold? If you've drifted far from where we began, good. This journey was never about arriving, but dissolving, like footprints in sand when the tide comes in. Some paradoxes aren't puzzles to be solved, but invitations to surrender, to wonder without grasping, to rest without conclusion, to let the mind become what it truly is, a quiet infinity. May your dreams tonight be filled not with answers, but with the beautiful weightlessness of not needing one. Sleep well, dear thinker. The questions will still be here in the morning.